Voodoo and Fate, written by Amelia Shaw. Published by Harley Romance Publishing, 2021. Chapter 1. The chime of the bells that hung over her shop door made Chantelle Dubois turn to greet her customer. Tanya? Her friend hurried toward her, and Chantelle stared a little harder, assessing Tanya's agitated posture and stricken face. Chantelle frowned. What's wrong? What's happened? Tanya's hands clung to the edges of her cloak, wrapped tightly around her body, and her skin was pale. You have to help me, Chantelle. Please. Tanya's lip quivered as silvery tears filled her eyes. Worry coursed through Chantelle's body, tingling in her fingertips. Tanya was one of the strongest women she'd ever met, and from one of the most influential families in New Orleans. What could have happened to make her this upset? Of course I'll help you. What's happened? She took Tanya's hand and led her to a couch on one side of the shop, dropping down into the comfortably worn cushions. I'm pregnant. Whoa. Now that's news. Tanya's parents were not going to be impressed. A sick feeling hit Chantelle's gut as she realized why Tanya was asking for her help. All right, are congratulations in order? Obviously not, but still, she had to ask. Or do you need something else? Chantelle hated helping people get rid of unwanted babies. She understood their reasons and often supported them, but when half her business was helping women conceive wanted children, helping some to get rid of them felt like a waste. And worse, an unnatural waste of her talents. No. Please don't congratulate me. Tanya shook her hands out in front of her. This is terrible. The worst possible thing that could have happened to me. I doubt it's that bad. I know your parents will be unhappy, but... Tanya's eyes went wide and wild. Unhappy? They'll be furious. Chantelle frowned, noting again the paleness of Tanya's cheeks and the grim set of her jaw. She was obviously determined to stick to this path, but she didn't look well. Start at the beginning. Tanya bit her lip, then shook her head. No. I don't need any help deciding. I need to get rid of this thing inside me. Please help me, Chantelle. You're the most talented voodoo priestess we have. Tanya's lips thinned with a determined strength. Or I'll find someone who will. Chantelle held up her hands and stood up. She didn't need the threat. Of course she would help. Even if she didn't like it. There were quite a few herbs in the recipe, but it wouldn't be hard to concoct. Okay, Tanya? I'll help you. She hurried around her shop, taking pinches of herbs and potions, and adding them to a Hessian bag as she went. Tanya was a member of their voodoo society. Her parents were strong and powerful. Why would she come to Chantelle for a relatively simple potion? You know you could probably do this yourself, Tanya. Why come to me? Because I have to make sure it works. Tanya all but screamed. Chantelle gaped at her friend. Such anger. What's with that? Chantelle finished off the vile-smelling potion and tied the bag with a string. You'll need to steep this in water for a full day, then drink it. At night preferably. You're going to be very sick for a few days, Tanya. You know that? She held the bag out to Tanya, whose desperation was starting to become far too apparent for Chantelle's liking. Tanya was practically salivating at the sight of the bag. Something was wrong. Chantelle's intuition told her she wasn't doing the right thing here. And her intuition was never wrong. As Tanya went to grab the bag, Chantelle pulled it back. She looked down at the poisonous potion clutched in her fingers. She had grabbed it back almost against her will. So strange. She hadn't meant to do that. Maybe she needed to ask just one thing. Who's the father, Tanya? Tanya's lip trembled and Chantelle stretched up to her full height, staring down at her. Tanya? She put as much weight and strength into her voice as she could. Tanya's eyes darted from Chantelle's hands to her face and back again. His name is Marty. And... She glared at Tanya and clenched her teeth. What could be so bad that she couldn't explain this decision? Tania's eyes filled with tears. I can't tell you, Chanty. You'll tell my parents or you won't help me, or? What could Tanya be afraid of? Was the father such an undesirable? She couldn't think of anyone in Louisiana who would strike such fear into the heart of a voodoo woman. Unless lightning struck, and her brain came up with a conclusion that was simply impossible. No, he isn't. You didn't. I didn't mean to. I just couldn't help myself. Maybe he put some sort of curse on me? Horror slammed into Chanty with the force of a fist, making her whirl backwards, her spine slamming into the glass cabinet of voodoo dolls she sold to the tourists. It couldn't be. A wolf shifter. She breathed the words. The wolves had been their mortal enemies for generations, but they had long stopped coming to New Orleans. They hid in small country towns, unable to compete with the power of the voodoo queens and the people who followed them. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Tanya said as she collapsed onto the couch in a shower of sobbing tears. Chanty stared at her, unable to approach, yet she couldn't walk away either. A half voodoo, half wolf child could be anything. An abomination. Here. Take it. Chanty tried to push the bag out of her hand. Her arm would not extend. Ridiculous thing. Stop it. Take it, Tanya. Take it and go. Her breathing labored as she inhaled and exhaled. Heat filled her lungs. Then something occurred to her. Dear goddess. No. Did he force you? Is that why you must get rid of it? Their gazes clashed and Tania's eyes softened, a pleasant memory filling her eyes as she almost smiled. No. No, he didn't. Chanty forced herself to relax a little. That was a good thing. Perhaps this was just a one-off event. A good girl from the right side of the tracks, and a bad boy from the wrong side sort of thing? She could hope. Her hand wasn't unclenching and she couldn't seem to let go of the Hessian bag, and as Tanya edged closer, Chanty had to will herself not to push her away. What was with her body? Why wouldn't she want to help this girl get rid of a beast? Quick, Tanya. Just grab it from me. I can't let go. Chanty closed her eyes and told herself to comply with her words. Let go. Let go. She swallowed the scream that rose as Tanya tugged the bag from her grip. Her eyes sprang open as she watched Tanya dart across the shop and out the door, the tinkle of bells sounding again. With a huff of breath, Chanty collapsed onto the leather couch. A couch she had counseled so many people upon. As a voodoo practitioner and a descendant of the high priestess, she was a natural healer. People came to her seeking remedies for all sorts of things. Physical ailments, heartbreak, infertility, and curses. She didn't like the punishing and evil side of voodoo, but she knew the craft, had learnt the art from her grandmother before she died. As Chanty was putting away the last of the wolf shifter poison she'd made in the small room at the back of the shop, the bells above the door chimed with a harsh clang. Someone was in a hurry. She called out from the back room. Can I help you? I was just about to close. The person didn't speak, and as she stepped into the shop once more, she couldn't see anyone until she walked around her shop counter. There was a man in her shop. The man was hiding behind a rack of scarves, his huge shoulders peeking out from either side of the brightly colored fabrics. Hello. Then the smell of him hit her like she'd run into a wall. Sex and male, sweat and muscle. Her knees weakened and her body throbbed. What sort of magic was this? The man stepped out from behind the rack, his silver eyes causing a shiver of a long-forgotten memory to pass through her mind. Who are you? She asked. He had long dark hair to his shoulders and cat-like almond-shaped eyes. The color was liquid moonlight and reached out for her very soul. I'm Cody. His husky deep voice made Chanty shiver anew. He was familiar, too familiar. Like a dream she'd had forever. Why do I know you? She forced her legs to straighten and lifted her hand toward him, stretching out her arm as though to touch him. She didn't dare, of course, but damn, she was so tempted to stroke the olive skin and run her fingers through his silky hair. Why was she feeling this incredible attraction toward a man she'd never met before? He stepped forward, his lips thin and tight. "Did the girl Tanya come to see you?" Channy's arm dropped and cold slithered down her spine. Was this the father of Tanya's baby? No. Was this man a wolf shifter? Possibly. He looked strong, and the chemistry between them was animal-like and intense. "How do you know Tanya?" Chanty asked him. She forced herself to keep her voice calm as she headed back around the counter. She reached for a protection charm she'd made that lay on a nearby shelf and wrapped the leather strip around her wrist. Whatever this man was, wolf shifter or human, he was going to be something special to her. She knew it in her bones, the way she knew that she was a direct descendant of a voodoo high priestess. But that didn't mean he was safe. Cody's face twisted, and Chandy could practically see the fight he was having in his head, trying to decide what he was going to say to her. "Did you give her what she came here for?" he asked. Chanty narrowed her eyes. "Of course I did." The man's grim facade broke, and utter frustration coursed across his face. "Damn it. Chanty, how could you?" She cocked her head to one side and stared at him. "Do I know you?" Cody growled and shook his head, weaving around her many display cases and keeping distance between them. Her pulse kicked up a notch and she swallowed hard. Should she be running for the safety of her back room? It had a lock. And a shotgun hidden beneath the shelving for emergencies. "Why would you do that?" he demanded. "She can't kill off the baby. It's the start of the new." "New what?" She jumped to ask, then gulped. She needed to ask the question. "Are you at wolf shifter?" She looked harder. The silver eyes. The square jaw. The huge shoulders and coiled strength. "You are." "Oh, goddess." Panic slammed into her. She knew so little about these creatures. They hadn't proved a threat in her lifetime, and the voodoo community in New Orleans had become quite complacent about the wolves living out of town. What could she do to stop him if he wanted to hurt her? She had a gun in the back, hidden amongst the extra skirts. If he wouldn't leave, she would have to make him. She inched toward the door. Cody darted around the counter and grabbed her. His arms came around her body, squeezing tight. Adrenaline zinged along her veins, pooling between her thighs. Her knees gave out. She sank lower and he held her up, staring down at her as magic wove around them. He bent his head toward her and she froze. Everything inside her mind screamed to get away. To stop him. But her body melted as he grabbed her tighter against his body and cupped her face with his hand. When he dropped his head further, she gasped, but didn't resist as he pressed his lips to hers. Suddenly, all thoughts of running away from him disappeared as her body turned into a puddle of screaming rapture. Orgasmic tingles pulsed in her core as her nipples tightened and her spine arched, forcing her into even more contact with his body. Cody pushed her away, and the cold drove in like a steam train, pushing the fog from her mind and the heat from her body. "What the hell was that?" she demanded of him. Then her knees folded and she let herself fall gracefully into a folded leg sit on the ground. She stared up at the man-mountain who had just reduced her to the weakest woman she'd ever been. If that was what one kiss can do, imagine what his touch might do. He answered, "Destiny." He stared at her a moment longer, and then turned and fled like the wind. What on earth had just happened?
Chapter 2. Cody's wolf snapped and growled inside his mind. Settle the fuck down. Now. He'd met his mate. The one and only woman he was meant to be with. And she was a fucking voodoo witch. Of all the rotten luck. He pounded the pavement as he stormed through the town looking for his little brother Marty. Marty had come across a beautiful young girl at a bar a few weeks ago. According to his brother, they'd hit it off like nothing else. They'd had the wildest sex imaginable, and then she'd disappeared. Marty had found her again, through some of their towny friends, but she was supposedly running scared, and wouldn't respond to any of Marty's messages. According to their sources who had been watching her, the chick was pregnant. Half wolf shifter, half voodoo royalty. How was it even possible? They'd been told they couldn't breed outside their own pack. Cody had often doubted the elders on that point. Was breeding with others impossible? Obviously, it was discouraged, but there had always been a kernel of curiosity about it in his mind. Or was it a lie told by the little human to get his brother back? A part of him had hoped it was all a falsehood until he'd met Chantelle. Now he knew something he'd never known. Matings between humans and wolf shifters was more than possible. If Chantelle was his fated mate, why wouldn't his little brother have a witch mate too? He'd been following Tanya, only to see her go into the voodoo shop. He'd listened at the door, and heard her ask for something to get rid of the baby. Anger and pain had slammed into him. If it really was true and his brother had conceived a child, Tanya couldn't kill it. This baby could be the only way to fulfill the prophecy and re-bond their communities. It had long been said by the elders that the wolves were meant to live in peace and harmony with the townspeople. That was only achievable with the blending of their blood and, of course, negotiating with the people in power in New Orleans. No one he knew of had ever tried such a thing. Cody hustled along the street and looked ahead. There he saw his brother, hiding in the alleyway next to a triple-story house. He had his back pressed up against the wall in the shadows and was casting furtive glances up at the windows above him. He sidled up next to Marty and leaned against the wall himself, needing the moment to gather his thoughts. "Did you find her?" Marty asked. "I found more than just her." "What do you mean?" Cody inhaled sharply. This was such a hard thing to say. "I met my mate." His brother swung around to face him. "What? Where?" "In the voodoo shop Tanya went into. She's the owner, or whatever." "A voodoo witch? Are you kidding me?" "I wish." "No. And she's more than that. I can feel the power in her, the strength. I heard someone talking about her outside, and heard what Tanya said to her. She's one of the most powerful priestesses they have, and Tanya's no slouch in the voodoo arts either." His brother's eyes bulged. "What? My mate's a voodoo priestess too." "Excuse me? You're what? You said she was just a one-night stand." "A good fuck." His brother growled, low and menacing. "Don't say it, Cody, or I'll rip your fucking head off." Cody bit his tongue, swallowing the disbelief and surprise in his heart. His brother's mate. Why didn't you say anything before, Marty? He'd thought it was a little strange that his brother was chasing down this girl after only one night, and that she'd conceived so readily. It was unheard of. His brother turned away, his jaw set and tight. "I was ashamed," he said. "I'm your beta. The son of an alpha. Why wouldn't I have a wolf shifter mate?" Marty was looking at this the wrong way. Cody slapped his brother on the back. "Because you're destined to be our savior. Come on, brother, you know the legends. This could reunite our families, bring us back to New Orleans." Excitement bubbled in his veins. For so many generations they had been outcasts, not welcome in the human world. That could change. Forever. Cody pushed aside thoughts of his own mate and focused on his brother's more immediate problem. He glanced at the house beside the alley. "So, little brother, did your mate come back here?" "Yeah, I saw her go in the front door. This is her home, I think." Marty pointed at the 3-story mansion. "Shit, she has to be rich." Cody ran a hand through his long hair. "Do you know anything else about her?" Marty shook his head. "Damn. I have to tell him." "Well, from what I heard at the shop, she's from a real wealthy family." Marty rolled his eyes. "Obviously, look at the house. Smart ass." Marty looked back at the mansion, as though he couldn't keep his eyes off one of the top windows. Cody went on. "Her family is one of the oldest and most powerful voodoo families in New Orleans. What? Marty swung around to face him, staring with wide-open eyes. There's something else too, Marty. He swallowed hard. This was going to hurt. She's trying to get rid of the baby. There was a beat of silence, and then his brother blinked. Excuse me? Marty's hands curled into fists, and he was sending out a vibe that made Cody want to back away. Technically, until their father handed over the mantle, they were both betas. But as the eldest, Cody would take over the role as alpha of their pack. Unless his brother challenged him for it, which they'd never discussed. He had to swallow hard against the need to tell Marty to calm the hell down. I followed her to Chante's shop, and listened to everything they said. The church they belong to think that any babe of ours is sacrilege. Fuck. Me. His brother's anger seemed to drift away as shock took its place. But this is fate, Marty muttered. She's my mate. That baby is destined to be. Cody chuckled without humor, pushing through the need to empathize with his brother's emotions. I know, my brother, I know. But they're not going to believe that. You know what they're like. Marty grimaced and cursed under his breath. The people who practiced the ancient art of voodoo in New Orleans were an unusual mix of the original voodoo brought over from Africa several hundred years ago, and the Catholicism that was forced onto them. They believed in Jesus Christ and many ancient gods and goddesses. Why not fate? We must stop her, Marty, and I think I know the way. We have 24 hours until your mate drinks the potion that will kill off your heir. We must convince Chante to stop her. Marty nodded with grim understanding, and together they walked away from the house to formulate a plan.
Chapter 3. Back at her house, a few blocks from the shop, Chante was curled up on her couch, cradling a mug of hot peppermint tea and mulling over what had happened today. A wolf shifter baby had been conceived, and she'd been asked to assist in its abortion. An aberration of nature. A ridiculous thing. She'd never really considered whether she believed the stories she'd been told about the wolf shifters or not, having never met one. And then a wolf shifter had kissed her to within an inch of her life. God, she'd wanted him to take her right there on the countertop. She ran a hand down her neck and let it flow over her sensitive breasts. Her body was still burning for him. A shiver coursed through her. What had that been between them? She'd never felt anything like it. A knock came at the door. She frowned. Who could that be? She glanced at the clock on the wall. 9 o'clock. Not too late. Someone who needed her help, perhaps. That thought had her hurrying toward the pounding. What could have happened? She pulled open the door. The wolf shifter stood on her doorstep. His silver eyes blazed at her, and a cascade of fire flowed through her core. The man next to him was just as big, but not as attractive as Cody. He had darker, curlier hair and a crooked nose. Chante sighed. Damn. Did you bring another one with you? This is my brother Marty, Cody said. Can we come in? She crossed her arms over her chest. Can I trust you? Their eyes met, and a frisson of heat spiraled through her. He nodded slowly, and she stepped back with another sigh. She didn't have much choice anyway. Fate was dragging at her. Destiny. It had its own magic, and she could feel it weaving between them all. They ambled into her small home, the men filling up the space like two huge trees. How can I assist you, gentlemen? Do you need a charm, perhaps? A spell? She couldn't imagine either one of them needing help in the love department or protection. Even wishing evil on another could be easily achieved by their strength and power. How could she possibly help them? Chante sat down on her favorite armchair and moaned with longing as her body shivered with an electrical attraction, her back instinctively arching toward Cody. He groaned in unison and fell onto the couch as though knocked down by an invisible force. Stop doing that, Cody said, his voice strained. Me? What on earth am I doing? She grabbed at her long skirts and tangled her hands in the folds to keep from reaching for him. Cody rolled his eyes at her like it was her fault. They felt like two magnets being pulled together, then beckoned to his brother to join him on the couch. Marty dropped into one of the other chairs, his huge body folding down awkwardly. Cody and his brother shared a look. Then Cody leaned forward and spoke directly to her. "We'll cut to the chase, Chantelle." She nodded and resisted a smile. Wolf shifters were known in her community for being fierce beasts. Unthinking, unfeeling animals. But before her sat two men who had full control over their words, facial expressions, and emotions. If Cody's ability to walk away from their kiss this afternoon was any indication, the reports on their lack of control were very wrong. Which meant she really had no idea what to expect. "Tanya, the girl who came to see you this morning." Marty stopped. Chantelle inhaled sharply, realization dawning. "You're the father of her baby." He nodded once. "Yes. And I know that you gave her something to get rid of it." Chantelle hesitated. Her gaze slid over to Cody, who narrowed his eyes at her. He'd known when he confronted her at the shop. He must have been listening at the door. She sat up straighter and looked at Marty. "Yes, I did. She came to me for help, and I gave it to her. Even though a deep, instinctual part of her had known it was wrong." A deep growl rolled out of Marty and her stomach dropped. What did she have in her home for protection against a wolf shifter? She wore her amulet, and it had not failed her yet. Hopefully it wouldn't this time either. Chantelle forced some strength into her voice and said, "Please settle yourself or you may leave." Hopefully she sounded braver than she felt. Marty stood up and began to pace. Her heart beat in time with the pounding of his heavy footsteps on her floorboards. "She can't get rid of it, she can't. I need to stop her." Chantelle searched inside herself for the magic she knew was there and pushed outwards, calming Marty, encouraging him to sit and relax. She didn't like to use her ability to sway people too often, but when it helped them get to a solution, it was best. Not to mention the fact that she would feel safer. The big wolf shifter swayed a little. She waved at him, forcing her voice to stay calm. "Sit down, Marty. We can sort this out." He fell back into his chair, shaking his head as though he didn't know what had just happened. Chantelle addressed Marty. "Tell me why this is so important to you. It's obvious Tanya means a lot more than she should. I have never in my lifetime seen a wolf shifter in town. What brings you this far?" The brothers looked at each other without speaking, although they were definitely communicating in their own way. She waited. She had all the time in the world. Finally, Cody turned to look at her. "How much do you know about wolf shifters, Chantelle?" "I will admit, very little." She knew what she'd been taught. That they were little better than rabid dogs. Dirty and trustworthy and stupid. But she wasn't telling them that. Marty continued. "Wolves rarely mate outside our own pack. In fact, we were told it would be impossible to conceive a child with a human. Shifters are born, not bitten. Even when a wolf shifter would fall in love with a human in the past, they would rarely conceive, and if they did, that child would never be a shifter." Marty stopped and took a breath. However, there are a few exceptions to the rule. The alphas or alpha-born males in our pack have predestined mates. We know them on sight and often by their smell. Tanya is my fated mate. I saw her at a bar one night about 6 weeks ago and knew instantly. She ran away after the night we'd spent together, knowing what I was. I thought I could go back to the pack and forget about her. I can't. And knowing she carries my child, I can't allow her to destroy the legacy of our pack. A child that is destined to be. Chantelle blinked. They spoke of powers out of their control. Of fate and destiny. Were these really the creatures she'd been told about? "I have to tell you both something as well." Chantelle stopped to lick her dry lips. "I am a voodoo practitioner, as you would know from my shop, but there's something else I'd like to tell you. I have several gifts passed down to me from my ancestors. One is an intuition that is never wrong. A third eye, so to speak. And this morning, she bit her lip. She still couldn't believe she'd gone against a feeling that was so strong. Everything in her had not wanted to give Tanya that medicine, and yet she had. Too many years of hearing the bad stories of the wolves had tainted her, and she was furious with herself for falling for such a common mistake. She knew better. She took a deep breath and plowed on with her explanation. I did the wrong thing with Tanya this morning. Every part of me knew what I was doing was wrong. I literally couldn't give her the medicine. She had to take it from me. I've never felt anything like it. And because of that feeling, I will help you. It's obvious to me that I was not meant to give her that poison. There was silence in the room as the men stared at her. Thank you, Chantelle. We thought you would be harder to convince, Cody said, his eyes sparkling silver in the evening light. She shrugged and put a hand to her belly, which fluttered and twisted when Cody stared at her. She hadn't worked out what the special attraction to him was, but she would have to give attention to it at some point. After this mess was sorted out. I will warn you. Don't cross me, she said. I know this world and the voodoo community. You will need to trust me to help you, as I have said I will. A soft chuckle rolled through the men. Trust a voodoo queen whose ancestors were probably one of the reasons we were banished from New Orleans? Marty growled. Chantelle sat up straighter in her chair and fixed them with a stare. That was not me, and it was not you either, she said. If you want my help contacting Tanya and convincing her to birth a half-breed baby, when her parents are two of the most powerful people in the city, then you need to trust me. I believe that you are here to help, not harm. And I trust my intuition that this baby indeed is meant to be. Marty flung himself back in his chair and Cody reached out for him, squeezing his brother's arm. We need her help, brother, Cody said. And she has no reason to help us, other than wanting to do the right thing. Surely that is all you need? Marty frowned. No, it isn't. But knowing what she is to you, makes me want to believe it. Huh. I'm what to him? Marty turned toward her, his mouth pressed into a thin line. Yes, we'll trust you, Chantelle. And I will follow your direction, no matter how hard that will be for an alpha. His tone was strangely dominant, and she struggled not to balk at the arrogant way he spoke. Thank you, but what did you mean by that comment? What am I to Cody? Marty opened his mouth, but Cody jumped in. That's not important at the moment. I think we need to fix this problem first, and then talk about that. He threw his brother a shut-your-mouth look, and Chantelle couldn't help the giggle that escaped her lips. It was all so intriguing, and yet, she couldn't handle any more at the moment. Yes, I think we have more than enough to deal with. If Tanya went straight home and started steeping the brew I gave her, we have about 20 hours before she drinks it. That should be enough time to convince her not to take it, but there are lots of other people, including her parents, that could make it for her again. We need to convince her not only to not take my potion, but to keep the baby. The men chimed in beautiful baritone unison. Agreed. Then we have a big day tomorrow. She glanced at the clock and felt the wave of tiredness pass over her. I need to rest, and something is telling me this is going to be a bigger fight than any of us anticipate. Would you both like to sleep here tonight, or do you have somewhere else to stay? Marty shrugged. We could go back to the pack. It's a couple of hours' drive each way, brother. Chantelle stood up and took a few steps away from the brothers as her nipples throbbed with need. Cody's body was calling to hers, and she would be lucky if she made it another day without begging him to take her. It wasn't a feeling she was comfortable with, but as an intuitive person, she would trust her body and hope that nothing bad came of her attraction to the alpha. Then it's settled. There's a spare bed in there, she said, pointing to the guest room, and the couch, of course. There's a bathroom through that door, and please help yourself to the food in the fridge. She turned her back to leave and thought better of it. And try not to touch anything. Every room has different spells and charms on them, for protection mostly. If you mean me no harm and don't go touching anything, you'll be fine." Their eyes widened, and they looked around as though someone was set to jump out at them. "Good. Let them be a little wary of me. Good night, gentlemen." There was a chortle of amusement from Cody as Chantelle staggered into her bedroom on molten legs, shutting the door behind her. Hopefully, she would be able to convince Tanya not to go through with the termination, and they could all move on with their lives. But as her limbs pulsed with heat, and her heart ached with the pain that would come from being separated from the wolf shifter, she knew her simple plan wasn't how it was going to turn out in the end.
Chapter 4. 2 hours on Chantelle's couch, and Cody was going insane. His skin itched, his blood boiled, and his cock was so hard it lay against his belly like a lump of wood. He twisted onto his side and punched the pillow beneath his head. He was going to get some fucking sleep, even if it killed him. Who knew what tomorrow might bring? A door creaked behind the couch, and he sat straight up. Chantelle's dark hair was down, falling over her shoulders like a black waterfall. She wore a blue singlet and only her underwear. Her long legs stretched out, bright in the soft moonlight coming in the windows. "Oh? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you. It's just, I can't sleep." Cody couldn't speak, his wolf swimming up to the surface with strong, undeniable movements, growling and purring as his mate stepped closer. She held out her arms, welcoming him in. "What is this, Cody? I don't understand it." He rolled over the back of her couch and grabbed her up into his arms. She gasped and grabbed hold of him, her nails digging into his flesh as she lifted her lips up to his. He pulled her close at the same time as he dropped his face to meet hers. Their lips met and he pressed down, opening her mouth and tasting the first lick of sweetness. An explosion of pleasure rippled through his body, and he groaned loudly. He needed to get closer. As close as possible. He lifted her up, and she wrapped her legs around his waist, grabbing onto his bare shoulders and kneading the tight muscles there. She gyrated her pelvis against him, breaking off to pant. "Please. My bedroom." He grabbed her tightly and strode straight into her room, walking until his legs hit the mattress, and then falling flat, he put up his arms to protect them as they landed. Chantelle groaned and swiveled her hips. He kissed her again on the lips, then trailed down her body, kissing the long line of her throat and the rapidly fluttering pulse at the edge of her collarbone. Chapter 5. When Cody woke, he glanced at the clock, unable to believe his eyes. 7 hours had come and gone. "Good morning." Chantelle's sleepy greeting had him turning to look at her. He reached his arms above his head and stretched out his back. "I think I just had the best night's sleep of my life." She quirked an elegant dark brow. "You think?" He huffed out a laugh. "I know. Damn, what did you give me last night?" "I think it was you who gave me something, not the other way round." She stretched and rolled out of bed, her elegant back flashing as she bent to pick up her clothes. Artwork covered her beautiful shoulders. "Wow. Your tats are incredible." He hadn't seen them last night. Black roses covered her upper back and down her arms. "Thank you. But they're not tattoos. I was born with these. No one knows why." "No way." He shuffled over to the side of the bed, and she stilled. He raised his hand and traced her skin. "They're beautiful." He pressed a kiss to the base of her neck and she shivered, a soft moan escaping her lips. "Thank you." She stepped away and grabbed clean underwear from the side table, then slipped into a simple black dress she pulled out of the closet. She swept her hair back up into an elegant arrangement on top of her head. "Let's eat and get moving. Time is running out." He nodded, pulling on his underwear and moving out into the lounge to grab his clothes. His brother was already there, dressed and pacing. Marty raised an eyebrow at him and Cody shrugged. He wasn't saying anything about last night. He wasn't even sure it was real. He reached for his clothes that were still lying next to his original spot on the couch, and tugged on his jeans. "You're pretty brave, you know, letting 2 wolf shifters you don't even know sleep in your home overnight," Marty said to Chantelle, as she stepped into the room and began banging around the kitchen. "Yes and no," she answered. "Coffee?" "Yes, please." "Black," Cody said, glaring at his brother. "What are you doing?" Marty ignored him and stepped closer to Chantelle. "Why wasn't it brave? Aren't you voodoo witches scared of us?" What was his brother doing? Trying to intimidate the one person who could help them. She turned and fixed Marty with a hard stare, and Cody moved into position beside his brother. Marty was his blood, and yet at this moment, he wasn't sure who he would protect if the time came. For the first time in his life, it might not be Marty he'd protect. Chantelle narrowed her eyes and held up her hand, ticking off one finger at a time. Number 1. I'm not a witch, I'm a healer. Number 2. My home is filled with protection spells and other voodoo charms. This house was my great-grandmother's. She was a very powerful voodoo queen, so I dare you to try anything here. A growl rolled out of Marty. Cody grabbed his brother's arm. Don't. Marty was shaking as though he was about to shift, and panic raced through Cody. He tugged at his brother's arms to pull him back, and yet the seconds ticked on and nothing changed. What the fuck is this? Marty asked through clenched teeth. Chantelle went back to making coffee. I told you. I'm protected from harm here. Relax. We need to eat quickly if we're going to find Tanya before she drinks my potion. Marty shrunk and stepped back, and Cody moved into the kitchen, desperately trying to calm down his wolf. How dare Marty try to hurt her? As though sensing his distress, Chantelle put a hand on his arm and handed him the coffee mug. It's okay. Sit. We'll leave soon. He walked toward the small table in the corner of the kitchen and sat down, his head spinning with the ramifications of what that sort of challenge to his allegiance would mean. He dared not think about it. Here. Eat. Chantelle placed a plate filled with pastries and bread rolls down in the middle of the table. His brother sat back and regarded the food with suspicion. Cody's stomach growled and he dug in, eating some of the delicious food and drinking the hot coffee she'd prepared. He'd never tasted anything like it. Wow, Cody managed to say between mouthfuls. This is just beautiful. Thank you. Chantelle sat down at the chair next to him and picked up one of the fruit-filled pastries. You're welcome. I don't usually have so much at the house, but I was walking past a shop on my way home last night, and just had the feeling I needed to buy everything they had left. She gave him a shy smile and ate her breakfast. Cody glared at his brother, and eventually, after watching Chantelle eat also, Marty joined them. They finished off the whole plate, and even Marty groaned his thanks for the rich food. All right, Chantelle said, taking charge. Let's go. The brothers followed her out of the house, into the crisp morning air and sunshine. New Orleans was beautiful, and Cody was glad he was finally here to see it with his own eyes.
Chapter 6. Chantelle nodded at a passerby in the street outside of her house, then pulled her front door closed behind them. Out here in the world, she didn't have the same protection as she did in her home, but she couldn't let fear rule her heart. The voodoo community hated the wolves, and if it was discovered she was helping them, the consequences against her could be dire. But she had to stay strong. Today was going to be testing, that was for sure. This way, she indicated to the two huge men standing beside her, and together they began their walk to Tanya's home. A huge part of her was still rattled by what had happened between Cody and her yesterday and last night, although she was trying not to show it. What had possessed her to throw herself so unashamedly at Cody, and then not letting the man leave her bed afterward? Not that she regretted asking him to stay. She'd needed him close, and that feeling hadn't abated this morning. She'd never felt like this before, with an all-consuming passion that went far beyond the conscious. So, what do you know about Tanya, Marty? She asked. Marty, the big lug, just shrugged. We had one night together, and not much talking was done, to be frank. Yep, she got the idea. She wasn't sure she liked Cody's brother much, but despite all the bravado, she could feel that he was a good man beneath it all. Well, I'll tell you a little then. Tanya is young, but she is strong and she is powerful. She comes from an old, established family, who would be truly mortified if they knew what has been going on. Marty gave her a dirty look, and she just waved her hand in rejection of his supposedly wounded feelings. Don't look at me like that. Anyway, here's the house. She stopped outside the mansion that belonged to Tanya's family. A shudder ran down her spine. The voodoo on this place was dark. She didn't like to use that side of their religion. For her, voodoo was about peace, love, and healing. But there was another side to the faith. One Tanya's family knew and used, too often if the vibe from the house was any indication. I'm going to go inside and talk to Tanya, she said. Hopefully she's home. You two stay here. Cody grabbed her arm. Are you sure you don't want me to come with you? No. I can't guarantee your safety in there. I don't know what sort of protection spells they have set up, but I don't believe it's as benign as my home. Cody's jaw tightened, but he let go, a flood of sadness flowing over her as he moved away to stand in the shadows. He was so big and strong, but his soul was so light and loving. She shook herself free of those thoughts and concentrated on her task. Tanya. The baby. Whoa, this is going to be tough. She gathered her courage and marched up to the front door, thinking only healing, calm, good thoughts. She wasn't here to harm anyone. She was here to help. She knocked on the large white door. A moment ticked by, and their butler opened the door. Can I help you? He asked. Yes, my name is Chantelle Dubois. I was hoping to speak to Tanya. Is she home? The butler inclined his head and she stepped inside, nervous butterflies taking wing inside her belly. Miss Tanya has not been up long, he said, closing the door. I will see if she is available. Please sit. Chantelle sank into the large, high-backed chair he pointed to, and waited as the butler ascended the stairs and disappeared along a corridor. She let her gaze wander from the huge oak staircase to the large chandelier. The home was grand indeed. When the butler returned, descending the steps, Chantelle stood up to meet him at the landing. Miss Tanya would like to speak to you, but would prefer you to follow me. Please come. He turned around, and Chantelle followed him back the way he'd gone. He led her down a corridor with plush carpeting and halted outside a bedroom door. In here, he said with a small gesture at the door. Chantelle nodded and pushed open the door, her heart leaping in anticipation of what she would find. Tanya, lying on her bed in fetal position, was not what she'd been expecting. She rushed to the bed. Tanya, are you all right? Tanya shook her head, and as Chantelle moved closer, she could see the glistening of tears on her face. I can feel it, Chantelle. Moving inside me. How is that possible? Tanya looked up, her face a mess of red and blotched white. I don't know. It's only been a month since you conceived, has it not? Tanya sat up straight, her hair at an odd angle as she stared at Chantelle with accusing eyes. How do you know that? She swallowed hard and sank into the armchair next to Tanya's bed. Because Marty and his brother found me yesterday. Tanya's eyes went huge and wide. Marty? He's here. How did he find me? He tracked you down by scent, I believe. He told me that you're his one and only true mate, and he can't be without you. He asked me to come up and get you to speak to him. Tanya's hands went to her rounded belly. Does he know? Chantelle barely stopped her mouth from dropping open at the obvious changes in Tanya's body. How was her stomach so much bigger today? Chantelle nodded. Yes. He had someone following you, and they heard us speaking yesterday at the shop. Oh no. Tanya stood up and hurried over to her dressing table. The brewing tea stood there, the dark, murky water an ominous sign that it was almost ready to drink. I have to get rid of it now, she said, voice quivering. She lifted the mug. Chantelle darted toward her and knocked the potion from her hand, spilling the stench over the patterned carpet. They both stared at the ground, and a terrible tightening in Chantelle's gut told her something bad was coming. But she held tight to her instincts and twisted around, shaking her head at Tanya. No. You can't do that. Tanya stared at her as though she'd lost her mind, and perhaps she had. Why did you do that? Tanya asked, flicking her hand toward the carpet. I'm not sure, honestly I'm not. But everything in me tells me you can't kill off this baby, Tanya. Not today. Please speak to Marty. I can't in good conscience help you in this. Tanya snatched up the glass that had fallen and marched to the door. She yanked it open, standing to the side. Then get out. I'll make it myself. Her belly once again caught Chantelle's eye. It was dark in the room and Tanya wore a flowing dress, but she looked about 5 months along. How was that possible? But Tanya, can't you see that this is something special? If you can feel it already, maybe it's already forming? Perhaps the wolf shifter blood changed it? Does it grow faster? You look a lot further along than 1 month. We have to find out. Wolf shifter forming? What is she talking about? They both jumped as Tanya's mother walked into the room. She sniffed the air and then stared down at the carpet, her gaze landing on the spilled potion. It had a distinct color, one Chantelle knew the woman would recognize. Chantelle, did you do this? She asked, then she rounded on Tanya. What have you done? Before either Chantelle or Tanya could reply, the woman stared down at Tanya's hands, which were clutching her abdomen. You're pregnant? To who? It doesn't matter, Mama. Please help me get rid of it. Her mother seemed too calm as she pointed to the bed. Lie down and pull up your shirt. Tanya trembled as she walked to the bed and lay back, lifting her cotton dress with one hand. There was already a round bump, her flesh twitching and contorting beneath their gaze. Oh God! That is a real baby. Why didn't I check Tanya before I made her the potion? It's already too far gone for those herbs. What were you thinking, Chantelle? You could have killed my daughter. Chantelle held up both hands. Tanya said it was only 6 weeks. Get out. I will deal with this. Tanya's mother pushed at her, and Chantelle headed for the door, her limbs moving of their own accord. But even as she exited down the hallway, she was torn. Should she stay and help Tanya? What would her mother do now? Chantelle wandered down the curved staircase. A banging issued from outside and she jumped. The sound was followed by shouting. Oh fuck! She raced down the rest of the stairs and ran out into the street, but didn't see either of the men. Cody's arm snaked out and grabbed her, pulling her out of sight behind the building. She squealed, then swallowed hard, trying to calm the racing of her heart. What happened? Cody asked, still gripping her hard as though he sensed her fear. I spilled the potion so she couldn't use it, but her mother found us and, I think she'll try to get rid of it herself now. She turned to Marty, hope flaring in her mind. Maybe they could get out of this. Are you sure it's yours? That belly of hers looks like she's 5 months along already. Marty grimly nodded. Yes. That is how it is with wolves. Our gestation is only 3 lunar months. I wasn't sure if it would be the same for a human, but she's your mate and that changes things, she finished for him. Why did she already know so much? Damn it. This was getting more and more complicated. Chantelle, what can we do? Cody asked. This is my brother's heir. Possibly the next alpha for our pack. You need to help us. Please. He squeezed her hand and fire licked up her arm. I will help you, but I don't know how we're going to get in there now. She gazed up at the windows. Her mother knows I tried to help her, and there is evil in that house. You can't go in there. She squeezed tight to her wolf's hand. Okay, he said. Then we need a plan. I'll just go in there and get her, Marty growled out, the veins in his neck bulging. He stepped out from hiding and stormed toward the front door. Cody headed after his brother. No. Chantelle grabbed him by the arm, rooting him in place. You can't go in there. They stood together, silent, as Marty opened the front door and stepped over the threshold. He screamed in pain, dropping to his knees on the floor. Cody growled and surged forward to help his brother. She pushed back at him. Stay here. Don't expose yourself. She ran for the door as it banged shut, the sight of Marty on his knees holding his head in his hands the last thing she saw. Oh no. Dear Christ in heaven. What are they going to do to him? Tania's family were known throughout New Orleans as being devout Christians, but there was a side of them that few people knew about. They dabbled highly in the dark arts, and Marty was going to soon find out how powerful they were. She ran back to Cody and grabbed his arm, pulling him down the road and away from the huge white building. He was practically vibrating. What the fuck was that? What happened to him? I assume they have a very strong protective spell on the front door. Your stupid brother stormed in there wishing them harm, and it wounded him. What they'll do with him now, I can only guess. Cody growled as he planted his feet, making it impossible to pull him down the street. He's not stupid, He is stupid, she said, fury infiltrating her words. This could have been avoided, and now Marty had made everything 10 times worse. He didn't listen to me, and thought he knew what was best. But this is my world, and the rules here are different. Cody blew air out his nose. Chanty, he's an unmated alpha-born wolf who's found his mate. That makes him very, stupid. Let's go with that. Despite the grimness of the situation, she could see the humor in Cody's face again. We need to get him out of there, he said, glancing over at the door. Maybe I could. No. You can't. Whatever just happened to Marty will happen to you too if you go anywhere near that house. She stopped to take a breath. You're right though. We need to get them out of there. Both of them, preferably. Which means? She took more deep breaths. This was what she'd been afraid of. I need to go back to the shop and make us some amulets. She would have to delve into her power reservoir for this. And she wasn't even sure who she was doing it for or why, which would be a first. Cody nodded and touched her cheek with his hand, the move slow and kind, considering the danger and urgency of the situation. He looked deep into her eyes and said, "Thank you." Flashes of a future she had yet to live projected through her mind like a super-fast movie. Children with Cody's silver eyes. Bonfires and laughing, music and dance. The wolves and her community, all together as one. Chanty stuttered to a halt, her mind blurring with tears. Was that really what her future held? Cody's arms came around her, holding her tight as she let her eyes close over the tears running down her face. What's wrong? He murmured into her hair. What happened? Chanty, speak to me. Please. Cody's voice became urgent. The alarm was too strong, and she couldn't let him worry over what was an amazingly beautiful vision. She forced herself to relax and opened her eyes to look at him. Nothing's wrong, she said. I'm fine. Just overwhelmed, I think. Cody exhaled sharply. You're telling me. Now where to? Your shop or home? Shop first. She pulled away from his embrace and began walking in the direction of her shop. She would need a few things. As they stepped around the corner and her business came into view, her mother's words circled in her mind. A voodoo practitioner can cure ailments, grant desires, and confound or destroy one's enemies. Despite her born abilities and the call she felt toward the church and the people around her, Chanty had preferred not to allow the profiteering side of the business to influence her. She treated everyone equally, whether it be a beggar on the street or a rich international businessman. But here she would be going up against her own people, and for what? Wolf shifters? She needed to know more about who she was fighting for. Cody, come with me. She unlocked the door to her shop and drew him inside. She pulled a key from her pocket and opened the glass cabinet to her right. It was full of her most expensive charms. She reached up and pulled down a leather strap with a pendant, then grabbed one of the wristbands. Put these on now, she said, thrusting them at him. Cody was weak in every way, and it scared her. His loyalty to his brother and his feelings for her would make him act foolishly. Coupled with his inexperience in this world, it was a deadly combination. Her hands shook as she tied the band to his wrist, and when he bent his head, she put the necklace on him. The pendant settled against his black t-shirt, and she picked it up and popped it down behind the material, against his skin. "It feels warm," he said. "Perfect. It will help protect you. Now, I need some white sage sticks, and I've got some mugwort out the back." Chantelle went through the list in her head and searched her shop for anything that came to mind that may help. She wanted to get home to make the voodoo dolls and potions she needed. "Tell me more about your world, Cody," she said as she worked. "Tell me why this is so important." Cody leaned against the wall, fiddling with the band at his wrist. "All right. I grew up being told stories about New Orleans. How it was a great city, but full of powerful and nasty people that had banned our pack from ever setting foot on its hallowed grounds again." Yep, that was pretty much what she knew as well. "But when I was about 18 and my brother 16, we took my dad's truck and drove here. Part of me thought we'd be burnt alive by just setting foot in town. But when we didn't and instead we came in and bought something, a trinket of some sort, we went back to my father and asked what the real deal was." "And what did he say?" Cody looked down. "He never told us the truth as far as I know. But the legends about our mates are clear. If Marty is mated to a New Orleans voodoo witch, then maybe we're not meant to be confined to the swamps forever." Chapter 7. Chantelle gathered the last of the supplies she needed and headed back to the front door. She already wore the strongest protective charms she could. She didn't need any more. "Let's go. I need to get home." Cody followed her like a shadow, and together they wove through the narrow, cobbled streets until they made it home. At the sight of her pitched roof and front door, relief filled her. She opened the door and turned to Cody. "What I don't understand is why your kind stick to the swamps. Why not move further out, or even come back to New Orleans? There's nothing livable for miles and miles outside of the city." "I know." Cody wrinkled his nose as they settled into her lounge room. "But that hasn't stopped my family from living out there for generations. If we could find a way to live peacefully back in New Orleans, I know a lot of us would move back here." Chantelle sat on the couch with 4 voodoo dolls in front of her on the coffee table and Cody on the armchair nearby, who watched her keenly. "Then maybe we can do something about that," she said. "What are you doing?" "I'm creating dolls for Tania's parents, Tanya and Marty." "You're going to hurt them?" She resisted the need to roll her eyes. "Of course not. No. I can use these to try to keep Marty and Tanya safe." She swallowed hard. "But yes. If I have to, I can." She concentrated on the 2 she made for Tanya and Marty, sprinkling the dolls with a potion for protection and good health. Then she lifted them up and carried them to her dresser, singing softly to them a song her mother had taught her for guidance and enduring hard times. Next, she took the 2 dolls for Tania's parents and wove them with a plant-based fiber meant to decrease a voodoo practitioner's powers and sprinkled them with a sleeping potion. Hopefully that would stop them from doing too much damage before she could get back to help Tanya and Marty. She wrapped all 4 of the dolls in a bag and tucked them into her knapsack. "All right. You're wearing the best protection I can give you, and the spells I put on the dolls will hopefully protect everyone else. That is the most I can do from here. We need to work out how we're going to get your brother back in one piece. Is there anything else you haven't told me?" Cody went silent, and Chanty's heart skipped a beat. "Cody? What is it? I haven't told you much of our mating system, have I?" Her belly dropped, visions of biting wolves and howling at the moon flashing through her mind. "No, but why is that important?" "It may be, just hear me out. As a wolf shifter, I am stronger than any human. Faster, bigger. I think that is why we were driven out of New Orleans so long ago. We were feared, and yet our need for shifting form at the full moon was seen as a curse. And a weakness. My ancestors allowed us to be banished, like the animals the rest of New Orleans think we are. His tone was bitter, and Chantelle moved to the couch to sit with the man who'd shown her nothing but passion and kindness. I can see how strong you are, Cody. But what has that got to do with? When a wolf shifter mates, we bind our soul to the other person. The strength is shared, linked. It is the most powerful bond we can have. When one of the pair dies, the other will often struggle to survive afterwards. My mother has managed, but only because the pack needs her. She has aged 20 years in the last 10. He coughed and cleared his throat. She waited for the point to come. But I'm not sure that would be the case if we mated with a human. I suspect that some of the strength would be shared, but perhaps not the full amount of a wolf shifter linking. I don't think a human would die from heartache as a wolf might. Chantelle nodded. I've seen it in humans too. When a couple has been together for as long as, say, your parents had, they simply don't want to live without one another. A muscle jumped in Cody's jaw, and Chantelle waited for him to speak. But he didn't. Although I appreciate you telling me more about the wolves, Cody, are you going to tell me the point of your story? We're mates, Chantelle. You are mine. If we shared the ritual tonight, you would absorb a lot of my strength. It would mean safety for you, going into this fight at my side. Chantelle blinked, her mind completely frozen. Pardon me? Can you feel it? The incredible heat and magnetism between us? Hell yes. Well, obviously I can, but that doesn't mean. It does. It's one of the first and strongest signs. If we don't mate, or are pulled apart for some reason, the pain will be terrible. I understand if you don't want to mate with me tonight, you barely know me, but I've never been so sure about anything in my whole life. You're everything for me now. She'd known it the moment he walked into the shop. He was meant for her. But how could she bind herself to this man? Why are you telling me this now? It would come out eventually anyway, and here I can offer you something that will keep you safe. If I am injured or killed, it shouldn't affect you too severely as you're human, but you'd absorb some of my strength. Chantelle pulled Cody closer, kissing his perfect lips to silence the words to come. Her instincts, those that she trusted more than anything, were sitting on the fence about this offer. She believed him. That in his world, and perhaps in hers too, they were meant to be together. Her vision had shown her a future that could be theirs to share. But how could they truly be together, with everything that stood in their way? A sharp knock sounded over and over. Cody looked toward the front door. Are you expecting anyone? She frowned. No, I'm not. And not many people would disturb me at home. She got to her feet and motioned to him to move. Hide in my room and don't come out. Cody nodded once, his jaw tight and his eyes flaring as he stood and moved into her room, closing the door but leaving a 2-inch gap. Chantelle frowned at the door. A cold shiver ran through her that told her to strengthen herself for the fight coming. She opened the front door. Tania's mother stood on the porch. The color had drained from her face, and she was almost green. Mary. What's wrong? You look terrible. My daughter told me everything, and that creature. He said she's his mate. Mary turned and spat on the pavement behind her. Can you help me? I don't know who else to ask. I know you tried to help already, but... This was her way in. I can come, Chantelle said. I want to help. Mary's face lit up. You will? Thank you. Let me get my bag. I'll just be a minute. She smiled at Mary and closed the front door gently. The voodoo dolls were already inside her bag, safe. She gathered a few more herbs as Cody walked out into the room. How can I help, Chantelle? You can't leave me here. She didn't want to, but how to disguise who and what he was? You need to change. Do you have any other clothes? He shook his head, and she searched her memory. She did have some of her ex-boyfriend's clothes in the spare room that she'd never gotten around to giving away. I have some old stuff. Come with me. Quickly. They hurried into her spare room, and she pulled out some jeans and a tank, a hoodie and a shirt from the closet. They'll be a bit tight. But I need to be able to say you're my boyfriend and a fellow practitioner. She threw the black shirt and black jeans at him. He gave her an, "Are you kidding?" look, and she glared at him, crossing her arms over her chest. He shrugged and began to strip off his older clothing. Her knees went weak, and she leaned on the bed at the sight of his incredible body. His thick thighs, his perfect ass, his focus. She hurried to her bathroom and grabbed some hair product, then returned to the spare room. She thrust the products at him. Slick your hair back so you don't look so wild. He grimaced but did as she asked. Another shiver shot through her and she danced on the spot. When he'd finished, she gave him an approving nod. Let's go. She took a few deep breaths and raced ahead to the front door. They would be fucking lucky if they got away with this. With her bag over her shoulder, she opened the door and gave Mary her sunniest smile. Mary, do you mind if my boyfriend comes along? You know, for protection against the wolf shifter. Mary's smug face made Chanty's belly tighten and drop. Don't worry about him. We've rendered him harmless. That could mean anything, but nothing positive. Cody stepped up, and Chanty's body melted at the sight. Damn, he's right about us. Cody, this is Mary. Mary, Cody. Honestly, Mary, I'd feel a lot better if he came with us. Cody managed a charming smile as he leaned against the door, hands in his pockets, looking smart and relaxed. Ah, sure. Mary's eyes ran over him, noting the voodoo accessories Chanty had put on him. Will he be able to assist us? He may. His mother was a friend of my mother's, Chanty lied. Mary clapped her hands with glee. Wonderful. Let's go. She staggered a little as she walked down the stairs, and Chanty grabbed for her hand. Are you all right, Mary? Yes, just feeling a little weak. The stress and the shock, I think. Or the spells I wove over you, perhaps. Oh yes, Chanty said. You'll feel so much better once this is sorted. She held tight to Mary's hand, chanting in her head. She didn't wish anyone in Tania's family harm. She wouldn't hurt anyone on purpose. But she would protect herself and those Cody loved. They followed along the streets of New Orleans, and she didn't even need to turn around to make sure Cody was keeping up. She could feel him behind her, like he was an extension of her soul. As the thought registered, she had to smother a groan. He was right about them being soul mates, or whatever name he wanted to put on it. He was so right.
Chapter 8. Cody's gaze was tugged to the gorgeous slopes of Chanty's shoulders and the hints of dark ink he could see around the straps of her dress. She was one beautiful woman. And she was all his. Despite the ridiculously tight clothes he was now wearing that smelled like another man, and the danger of the situation they were headed into, he was elated. His mate knew they were connected, what their destiny was. And despite the fact they hadn't been able to complete the mating, Chanty hadn't shown any signs that she was unhappy about the fact she was his. In fact, if this bitch in front of him hadn't knocked on the door when she had, they may have been linked for life already. The forever type of mating that wolves created had once scared him, but not anymore. He couldn't think of anything better than spending his life next to this beautiful, strong woman. When they reached Tania's house, he held tight to Chanty's hand as they followed Mary up the external stairs. Cody's wolf cried inside him, backing away into a dark corner of his mind. He could smell his brother, and he was hurt. Bad. He took a deep breath and focused on only good thoughts and intentions. He was here to rescue his brother. Help Chanty. Nothing more. Mary opened the front door, and she and Chanty passed through unharmed. Cody, conscious of the fact he couldn't look like he was afraid, strode straight through the door. If he was to be struck down by lightning, then let it be. Nothing happened, and he lifted his hand to stroke the pendant at his chest. Chanty's magic was powerful. So, what would you like help with, Mary? Chantelle asked Tanya's evil mother as they walked up the winding staircase, sunlight blinding him as it bounced off the marble floors. Bloody hell. Look at this house. How much money do these people have? I need you to help me abort the fetus without killing Tanya, Mary said. It's strong and I've had no luck so far. The woman, who Cody now wanted to punch in the face, pushed open a door at the end of the corridor, and moans came through to greet them. His wolf growled inside him, but he swallowed it down. If you give us away, we're all gone. He would be dead before he could shift, he was sure of it. And that was if he could shift. Marty hadn't been able to in Chantelle's house, so why would Cody be able to here? Smoke billowed out of the room, along the walls and over the carpeted hallway. They stepped forward, and Cody realized they were now in a bedroom, which stank to high heaven of death and blood. Jesus Christ. He gagged and covered his nose, his enhanced senses making it almost impossible to breathe in a room like this. What the hell is that smell? Chantelle shook her head and tutted disapprovingly. You're pushing both of their souls too hard. You'll kill all three of them, Mary. Chantelle waved her arms around, swirling black smoke obscuring his vision. He didn't want to ask what was happening. He was meant to be the bodyguard. Nothing more. You need to open the windows, Mary. This isn't the way to do it. Mary stomped off and fresh air blew into the room. Cody coughed and gagged, then forced himself to stand back against the wall, watching and waiting. When the black smoke cleared, he saw Marty for the first time. His baby brother was sitting on the floor and literally chained to the wall. His head was bleeding. His nose and eyes were a bloody mess. What had they done to him? Cody looked away from the sight, his chest heaving as his breathing began to change. He's alive. Calm down. You still have to get him out of here. What are you killing the wolf for, Mary? Chantelle asked as she walked over and knelt down, inspecting Marty like any doctor would, without showing any signs of attachment or disgust. Cody could feel the rise of anger and hatred toward these people, but pushed it down with all his might. He refused to look at the mess of a man they'd left in place of his brother. He's a werewolf, Chantelle, Mary said. They all deserve to die. Chantelle stood up and walked toward the bed that Mary was standing by. When Cody looked past his brother, he could see a woman lying on the bed. Tanya? Her skin was as pale as the white sheets she lay upon. Chantelle leant over the woman he assumed was Tanya. I don't know why you think that, Mary. They haven't hurt us. Mary's harsh laugh made him tighten his fingers into fists. If he was allowed to, he would throw her right out the window. You're too soft, Chantelle. Just like your mother. I'm a healer, Mary. I find it hard to see anyone in pain. Including the wolf. I'd treat a dog better than that. Mary's harsh gasp echoed in the room. Well, that dog got my baby pregnant. And look at her. She's growing bigger by the minute. How are we going to stop this? Give me a moment to examine her. Mary began to pace, her bright white hair tied up into a bun, shining like some sort of ironic halo. Cody retched, his stomach heaving at the evil stench in the room. Mary screwed up her nose and threw him a sardonic smile. Your boyfriend has a weak stomach. He isn't used to black magic, Mary. You know I don't use it. Chantelle's voice didn't waver, those same soothing tones making it clear she was in control. Well, you're soft. I don't know why I came to you. Mary spat in disgust. Because I'm the best, and you know it. Leave us. I need to concentrate, and you're distracting me. Mary glared at Chantelle, but his mate just looked back at the old bitch with a calm but stern expression. Mary finally gave up, throwing up her hands. Fine then. Chantelle continued to examine Tanya, checking her eyes, her hands, her belly. As soon as the door closed, Cody bolted to his brother. Marty. He crouched in front of him. Marty. Can you hear me? His brother groaned and nodded, but his eyes were too swollen to open. Give him some water, Chantelle said. There's some in my bag, but don't untie him yet, Cody. Please. He grabbed for Chante's bag where it lay next to the bed and pulled out a bottle, then held it to his brother's lips. It took everything in him not to untie Marty, but he had to trust that Chante had a plan. Marty drank as much as he could, some of the water spilling over his cracked lips. "Oh fuck, brother, what happened to you?" "Don't really remember," Marty slurred. "They tried to kill him, but it didn't work." Tanya's weak voice filled the room as she sat up and pushed off the bed, staggering to her feet. "I'm so sorry." Chante rushed to help Tanya, putting an arm around her friend as Tanya grabbed for her huge belly. The poor girl's face was thin and pale. She looked so sick. Cody's heart broke for the two people in front of him. They were the strongest of the strong, a pair that could rule his pack if he chose to step aside. And look at them. He took a shuddering breath. It was probably a great thing they were as strong as they were. They would have been dead if they were anyone else. He looked to Chante. "What are we going to do?" Chante blew air out her nose. "I don't know yet. We can try to carry them out of here, but we'll be stopped at the door." He looked toward the only sunshine in the room. The window, maybe. They were on the second floor. She screwed up her face. "It's a 30-foot drop. Onto concrete." "Yeah, but if I can get outside, I might be able to shift. Which means I can catch them." Cody grinned, the idea becoming more and more inspired. Chante turned to Tanya. "I know you wanted to get rid of this baby, Tanya. But you won't be able to. It needs to be born. Are you ready for that?" Tanya nodded, tears leaking from her pale blue eyes. "Yes. I think my heart broke in two when I saw my mama hurt Marty like that." Her voice trembled and she sobbed. "I never wanted that to happen. I just didn't want, oh God. I'm so sorry." Chante pointed to the door. "Lock the door, Cody." She turned back to Tanya. "Let's get you out of here." Cody did as his mate bade, then rushed to free his brother from his chains. He pulled and pushed using all his strength. The chains finally broke apart with a clang. "Fuck. That will bring someone." "Hurry," Chante hissed. Cody picked up Marty's weak form, his brother's weight heavy and stinking of death. "He smells like decay." Chante grunted as she pushed open the double window as far as it would go. "They tried to kill him. I have to assume my voodoo protection and his natural-born strength kept it from happening." She stepped back, gesturing to the window. "Jump out quick." Cody propped his brother up against the windowsill, jumped up onto the ledge and let himself fall. His wolf leapt to the surface, his clothes ripping apart as he transformed, landing squarely on all four paws. He shifted straight back, holding out his arms. "Jump, brother." Marty pushed himself forward, twisting awkwardly as he fell. Cody caught him, his head inches from the concrete. He righted him, pushing him against the white wall of the house. "Come on. You two," he yelled at his mate, his heart pounding as the real danger his mate was in rammed home. He'd left her alone up there. Chante's head disappeared from sight, and then Tanya slid onto the ledge, her eyes wide with shock as she squealed, then fell, her arms flailing as Cody caught her. He placed Tanya on the ground too, and she staggered toward his brother. Chante was next. He braced, ready to catch her. A scream issued from the bedroom beyond the window. Something smashed. "No. Chante." He glanced at his brother and future sister-in-law. Neither of them would be able to help rescue Chante. They needed to get out of here. "Marty, if you can, shift and take your mate back to the pack." Shifting into wolf form would make Marty's injuries heal faster, but that was only if he could. Marty nodded once. A horrible moan of pain rolled off him as his clothes ripped apart and a huge black wolf stood in his place. Cries of alarm rang around them as people in the street saw what they were doing. He didn't have time to deal with them. "Quick, Tanya, get on his back and hold on," he said, nudging her toward Marty. The poor pale girl nodded, then staggered as if she were about to fall over. With a glance up to the window, he lifted Tanya and placed her on his brother's back. "Hold tight and don't fall off," he said, patting her hands. Thank you, Tanya whispered. Marty lumbered down the street, limping and yelping as he tried to run. Cody cringed to see his brother in so much pain, but he needed to focus on his own mate. She was the one still in danger. He turned back to the window. Chantelle. A growl ripped through him as his muscles bulged, readying for the shift. One of her legs appeared, and then the other. Relief washed over him as she jumped without a seeming thought, straight into his arms. He pulled her tight to him and pressed his lips to hers. Thank God. A loud curse came from above them. A glass vase shattered beside them on the pavement. Quick, Chantelle said, pulling away. We need to get out of here. Now. Jump on my back and hold on. Do not fall off. He didn't wait for her to agree. He let the change take him over and dropped to his paws. Chantelle jumped on his back and clenched his fur. He took off through the streets, following his brother's bloody footprints and odd smell. People screeched and screamed, jumping out of his way. Food was thrown at them, so he took a shortcut, turning right and running straight down the main street. They had to get out of New Orleans and back to the pack. He didn't know what Tanya's family would do when they found them, but having a voodoo priestess on their side had to be a good thing.
Chapter 9. Chantelle kept her eyes open and clung tight to the gray fur that covered the wolf she rode like a horse. Her muscles ached as she clasped her thighs tight to his lean frame, the sheer thrill of running so fast making her heart pound like a bass drum. How had she been so wrong about these creatures? They were majestic, strong, honorable. Cody turned left and jumped over a log as they moved into the forest. She squealed and swallowed the sound. She couldn't be scared. She refused to be. She'd known her whole life there was a reason she hadn't realized her full powers and potential. And this had to be it. Her life partner was a wolf shifter. And her whole community had an inbuilt hatred for them. This was going to be a harder road than any she'd traveled before. Chantelle lifted her head from the harsh fur on Cody's back and squinted hard at the houses in the distance. Cody had slowed down and was now moving at a walking pace. Where are we? Even as she asked the question, she knew the answer. Where else would Cody take her but home? He stopped and waited. Did he want her to get off? She relaxed her cramped hands, gasping as pain pulsed through her tired, sore fingers. She slid off his back, her legs shaking as she hit the solid earth. A giggle escaped her lips as endorphins flooded her bloodstream. We made it. We actually made it. They'd managed to steal back an alpha wolf shifter and a voodoo priestess. The gods must have been watching over them today. Thank you, Loa. Beside her, a naked Cody stood, back in his human form, his chest heaving with exertion and his skin slick with sweat. This is my family's home, he said. I know it's nothing like the bright lights of New Orleans, but it's home. She finished for him, staring out in the distance at the primitive village. Small houses were built out of logs and simple timber. There were no street lights, but there were dirt roads and children playing in the gardens surrounding the houses. She'd never understood people's obsession with money and material possessions. All she'd ever wanted was to help people and have a family. Perhaps my wishes are finally coming true. But at what cost? Her mind whirled with the implications of what would happen when they were found, but she pushed the worries away. She was a powerful voodoo woman. She had to have faith that the gods would protect her. Let's go find my brother, Cody said. He took her hand and led her through the thick forest, finding a path of sorts that led into town. It was a ramshackle-style village. Lots of small man-made homes and no shops. What did they do for medical assistance? Food? Where would he be? She asked. My mother's house. Cody pulled her further into the town, the townsfolk all gathering along the edges of the path to take a closer look at her. They had long hair, and a dirty look about them that spoke of their wild heritage. She tried not to cringe, but struggled when a large man came too close. What do you have there, Cody? The man grabbed for her and Cody pulled her behind him, a nasty growl rolling out of his mouth. Back off, Cooper. She's my mate. Your mate. The man fell back and away, his hands coming up as though he were giving up. Since when do wolves mate with witches? I'm not a witch. She glared at him and the man gaped at her. Seems like ignorance goes both ways. Cody growled and dragged her down the muddy drive, walking right up to a larger, more well-kept home. There were wildflowers planted in front of the house, and a bright red door that had been carefully painted. Cody pushed open the door, pulling her inside. Once the door shut, she tugged her hand out of his grip. Her conscious brain knew that he was just trying to protect her, but as she unlocked her tight jaw, she acknowledged that she also didn't like being manhandled. He tilted his head toward the hall. This way. Chantelle followed Cody along the darkened hall, with threadbare carpet beneath her feet and no photos on the walls. They ducked into the first room, where there was a bed in the center of the room, with Marty lying on top of the blankets. There were 4 people in the room. 3 Chantelle didn't recognize, all crowding around the patient. Chantelle took a deep breath, and the smell of something acidic assailed her. She blinked, holding her breath. He's dying. 5 heads turned toward her. Yes. He is, an older woman answered, standing up slowly, straight and tall like a proud oak. And who are you? The suspicion in the air made Chantelle wrinkle her nose, a sneeze forthcoming. Hang on. Chantelle sneezed out the toxic air, her body unable to handle this environment for long. She would have to change the energy or get out. Fast. Sorry? Cody stepped up next to her, guiding her forward with an arm around her waist. Mom. This is Chantelle Dubois. She helped us escape. Marty groaned from the bed and she moved forward. Someone had dressed him after he'd shifted, but the clothes couldn't disguise the sick color of his skin. Tanya sat by the bed, pale and looking even more pregnant, if that was possible. Cody, can you get Tanya some water and something to eat? She asked her mate, wanting him to move out of the room for a moment so she could focus on Marty. Preferably high in sugar. She needs to get her energy back up. Chantelle didn't turn, but she heard him leave, the temperature in the room dropping lower as her body mourned the loss of her mate. She shook her head at herself. Ridiculous. Focus. May I? She asked, moving closer to the bed. The older man by his bedside stood up and stared at her. He must have been a relative of Marty and Cody's. He had the same shaped eyes and mouth. Then he nodded once and moved away, to the back of the room. Marty's mother, however, stayed close, touching him. I don't know why he isn't healing. Normally, once you shift into wolf form, most of your healing is complete. She gestured to her son and her face crumpled. Poor woman. No parent should ever outlive their children. I know you won't want to hear this, but he's been poisoned by black magic, Chantelle said. Voodoo I do not use or like. The woman's eyebrows rose high on her forehead and then narrowed to a frown. You're a voodoo witch? I'm a practitioner. A healer. Voodoo is a faith, not what the movies have made it out to be. I can help, I think. Would you allow me to? The woman's wrinkles increased as she frowned hard, her brown eyes shimmering with tears until she blinked them away. She nodded once. Chantelle stepped closer, then sat in the chair facing him. Marty lay still and pale on the bed. A lot of his injuries have healed. She reached out and ran her hands over his face, feeling for the energy pulses, his life force. He was beaten and bloodied, so swollen we couldn't see his eyes before. This is much better. She waved at his face as she moved down his throat, feeling the knots and fever in his skin. He collapsed just outside our town. His uncle carried him back and now he won't wake up. His mother's voice trembled as she spoke. Chantelle closed her eyes, putting both hands up and hovering over Marty's body. She moved them over his vital organs. Testing, feeling. Searching for anything that would tell her what she could do to help him. What had Tanya's parents done to him? Tanya? Chantelle's eyes popped open, and she reached her arm out to the woman who'd started all of this. Tanya, come here. Tanya fell forward onto her knees, crawling over to Marty's bedside and laying her hands on her lover's thigh. Please, Chanty. Please help him. I'll do anything. Chanty focused hard on Tanya. What did they give him? Do you know? Tanya shook her head, her sad brown eyes speaking volumes of her pain. They were trying to hurt me too. I don't know why my baby is still alive after everything they did to me. Tears welled into Tanya's eyes and flowed down her cheeks as one of her hands dropped to cradle her belly. Because I protected you, Chanty said. I protected you both. And if I was powerful enough for that, I will be powerful enough for this. Chanty wasn't sure if she was speaking to Tanya or herself, but either way it was true. Tanya's eyes went wide. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Chanty raised an eyebrow at the same girl who only yesterday had asked for an abortion. Really? Tanya's pale face flushed pink, her eyes downcast. I should never have asked. I don't want that anymore. Cody stepped back into the room and handed Tanya a bottle of water and a bowl of ice cream. Eat quickly, Chanty said. I'm going to need your help for this. She opened Marty's shirt and pushed the edges back so she could see his skin. Oh my God! Around his neck lay Nwanga, tight and high on his chest. Damn it! She grabbed for the poisonous amulet, her hands burning as she tugged and pulled. But she couldn't break the necklace, and it was tied too high on his chest to pull up over his head. Get me some scissors, a knife. Anything. This needs to get off him. Nwanga was a mix of bone, holy water, holy bread, and most importantly, the toxic roots of the figuer madet tree. To make the charm, one had to invoke the help of Jesus Christ and the gods. Tanya's parents must have really wanted him to suffer. Here. Marty's uncle handed her a knife, and she gently put it to Marty's throat, twisting and pulling the amulet away, then tossed it to the floor. He needed a poison cleansing, massive healing, and perhaps a level of magic she did not possess. Chanty ran her hands through her hair, her fear trembling along every cell. Focus. You can do this. To fix this, I need water, she said. Lots of it. We need to bathe his skin. Rid his body of all pollutants. And then I need to make a herbal drink. And then? His mother asked, gripping Marty's hand. And then we pray. Pray. To whom? Chanty put her hands in a prayer position, palms together. To everyone who may help us. Jehovah, Loa, Fate herself if need be. His mother nodded and walked out of the room, presumably for the water Chanty needed. She turned to Cody, who looked ready for action, his eyes bright and fixated on her. What do you need from me? I need to go and gather some herbs from the woods. Do you have a doctor or healer that I can consult with? He nodded. Yes, I can get him for you. His name is Daniel. Is there anything else? Yes, I need you to undress your brother completely while I go get what I need, then we have to treat him. I'll find Daniel for you and then we'll get started. Chanty gave him what smile she could muster, with all her energy being drawn to Marty. Cody pressed a quick kiss to her lips. When he pulled away, a cool breeze blew renewed air into her lungs. She sighed, grateful for his presence. I'll go get Daniel, he said.
Chapter 10. Cody hurried over to Daniel's small home that he used as a clinic. I need your help, Daniel. The healer rose to his feet, ready to help. As the alpha's son, there were definitely advantages like that for Cody. People didn't often ask questions, they just jumped to help. What do you need? Come with me. Cody flicked his head to indicate he should follow, and they both jogged back to his mother's house. My brother's sick. A black magic voodoo family put some sort of curse on him. Holy shit. Cody nodded, his tone grim. I brought another voodoo doctor back with me. She wants to help. Please give Chanty anything she needs. We need to save my brother. Daniel stopped and stared at me like I'd gone insane. Cody, I can help. You know I can. Cody reached out and squeezed his arm. This is voodoo magic, Daniel. Black magic. We need her help, so please don't fight me on this. Danny's nostrils flared, but he eventually nodded. Okay. Thank you. Cody opened the door and took Daniel to Chantelle. They spoke urgently for a few moments, then left together. He watched them as they rushed back to Daniel's house, obviously in search of something. He was proud that his mate might be the one to save his brother. That she was intelligent and kind, courageous and strong. But he also wished that her help wasn't needed at all. He let out a long sigh and stepped into the house. Time to get his brother ready for his cleansing. Tanya was sitting on a chair next to the bed where Marty lay, looking pale and drawn. Cody's heart clenched tight. Why would fate do this to them? Give both himself and Marty mates that were not of their pack, but instead, Chantelle and Tanya were born of a people who hated wolf shifters? There had to be a reason for it. There had to be. Cody stepped forward, needing to do something. Should we keep him lying down or sit him up, do you think? Tanya swallowed hard, pain etched into her pretty features. I think lying down would be best, but the bed is going to be drenched if he's washed properly. He shrugged. Nothing mattered past his brother being better. Perhaps we could put him in the bath then. Tanya's brows furrowed, but then she nodded. That may work. Can you carry him? He's pretty heavy. Cody grinned at the woman who would soon be his sister-in-law, if everything went to plan. I caught him as he fell out of a 2-story window. Carrying him into the next room should be fine. He moved over to his brother. Help me pull his jeans off if you can. Easier to do it here than in the bathroom. He lifted Marty up, and Tanya undid his jeans, then pulled them down his legs. His shirt too? Tanya asked, biting her lip in what looked like worry. Cody nodded. Good idea. That part wasn't easy. Marty's head lolled about, as they tried to sit him up and tug his shirt off over his head. By the time they lay him back down on the bed, Cody wasn't sure he wanted to move his brother again. He looks terrible. Tanya's eyes filled with tears, and her hands dropped to cup her huge belly. Damn, you're getting big fast, Cody said, unable to keep the thought inside his head. Even faster than a normal wolf mother. She looked down at her bulge, her hands beginning to move and make circles on the flesh. I know. I don't understand this at all. A normal wolf gestation is only 3 lunar months. Tanya nodded. And it's already been 1 full month, and the next full moon is next week. Her voice trailed off as her throat worked hard. I didn't know this would happen. Cody reached out and squeezed her shoulder gently. Hey. It's going to be okay. Fate chose you for Marty and for this pack. We will protect you. Have faith. That seemed to have some effect, as Tanya tossed back her hair and stood straighter. All right. Shall we move him now? Marty's head lolled to the side, his skin now streaked with black and green lines. The sight of the poison making its way through his brother's body got Cody moving once more. Yes? Let's go. He reached down and picked up his brother, throwing him over his shoulder in a fireman's carry. Marty was lighter than he remembered, which was not a sign of good health. Cody carried him into the bathroom naked and laid him down carefully into the porcelain tub, Tanya cupping his head so he didn't bang his skull on the tub. Should we start washing him? He asked Tanya, wishing Chantelle was here to help. Yes, Tanya said, kneeling down next to the bath. She reached over and turned on the taps, water pouring into the tub. Marty groaned as the cold water splashed on his pale legs and Cody's heart lifted. His brother wasn't dead yet. Tanya turned the hot and cold, checking the temperature with her hands until Marty's tense body seemed to relax into the tub. Black water swirled around him as the water began to fill the bath. Pull out the plug, Cody told Tanya. And just keep washing that crap away. I'll get some more cloths. Cody grabbed some washcloths from the closet and came back into the bathroom and handed them to his brother's mate. Tanya took the cloths and gently cleansed Marty's pale face, the dark circles beneath his eyes getting blacker as the day wore on. Is there anything else you know to do that we should be doing? He asked, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. She shook her head. I don't think so. I'd rather wait for Chantelle. Cody noted her color and went out to the kitchen, fetching her more ice cream and bringing it back in. Here. Eat some more, he said. You're still not looking good. She accepted the bowl and sat back on the closed toilet lid. Thank you, Cody. For everything. He shrugged and used the cloth to wash his brother's shoulders and arms. The water rolling off his skin was still a murky green. Cody stared down at Marty, feeling disheartened. I'd do anything for my brother, Tanya. In Chantelle? Tanya asked, a small smile lighting up her face. He chuckled. You noticed that, huh? Hard to miss. She's my mate, he announced, my perfect half. After all this, I'm looking forward to getting to know her better. Chantelle's awesome, Tanya said, scooping up another bite of ice cream. I've always respected her stand on her voodoo practices. How's that? Through the ages, voodoo has been used to cure ailments, grant desires, and confound or destroy one's enemies. But Chantelle has always refused to hurt others. Even when prominent, wealthy New Orleans citizens have asked her. No matter the payment, Chantelle has always used her skills to heal people. Unlike your parents. Tanya looked down and away, scarlet heat flushing her cheeks. Yes? They're not like Chantelle. Cody went back to focusing on his brother, an angry swirl of hate moving through his gut. If his brother died, there would be hell to pay. And New Orleans would not be safe from their pack anymore. You know we aren't the animals your parents say we are, he said. I know. He wanted to say so much more, but left it at that. No matter what now, Tanya would bear a half-wolf shifter baby. And she was the mate to his younger brother, an alpha-born wolf. Her life was inextricably linked to their pack now, as was her child. Cody? Chantelle's voice called through the house. In here. The bathroom, he answered. The door opened and his beautiful mate walked in, her long hair flowing down in dark rivulets around her shoulders. This was a great idea, Chantelle said, indicating to the fact we'd put Marty in the huge bathtub. Keep doing what you're doing, and I'll mix up the drink. Her hands were full of herbs and twigs, and even a small bottle of what he assumed was holy water. She disappeared again, and Cody kept the water running. His mother came into the room with some food for both of them, laying plates of sandwiches down on the sink. She stood next to the bath, her hands on her hips, and heaved a great sigh. This is not the way I expected to see my first grandchild born. My son leaving us and a grandson to replace him. His mother's voice was harsh as she stared at Tanya. Cody made a loud disapproving noise in his throat as Tanya shrunk back against the wall. Her arms wrapped protectively around her belly. Don't talk like that, Mom. Tanya is Marty's mate. What? She said, her aggressive posture relaxing. He didn't tell us that. He told me. In New Orleans. He was the idiot who waited a month to go and find her. This isn't her fault. So back off from all the doomsday speak and focus on getting this family back on its feet. His mother's dark eyes shone with unshed tears as she reached out a hand to Tanya. I didn't realize. I'm sorry. Come with me. I have some better clothes you can wear. Tania's long cotton dress was covered in blood and dirt, her belly bulging against the fabric. Tanya put down the empty bowl, got to her feet and lifted her chin. Thank you. She didn't take his mother's hand, but she walked out of the room, leaving Cody and his brother alone. Marty's breathing was stilted, his skin sallow and lax on his bones. Don't you dare give up, you bloody idiot, Cody said in a low voice as he continued to wash his brother. I'm not taking over the pack on my own. There are too many people for one alpha, you know that. We were meant to do it together. So, you can fucking forget about dying on me. A strange noise puffed out of Marty's mouth, almost like a laugh. Cody knelt beside the bathtub and squeezed his brother's shoulder. You're still in there, aren't you? Don't give up. Your baby will be born next week, probably with the full moon since it'll be an alpha. Chanty's making you some medicine now, so keep fighting, brother. I'm here. Chanty's voice made him jump as she stepped closer, moving around to the other side of the bath and kneeling down near Marty's head. Drink this. She lifted a glass to Marty's lips and tipped some of the brown liquid into his mouth. It dribbled down the side of his face, but she kept tipping, massaging his throat when he gargled and gasped. You need as much as you can handle, Marty, she said. Please just drink. Marty continued to struggle to drink, the liquid slowly disappearing from the glass. When it was empty, Chanty filled the glass with water from the still-flowing taps and began chanting in a language he didn't understand, as she poured the contents over his skin. The water bubbled and hissed as it hit Marty's body. She took off a necklace she wore and then leaned forward, tying the leather around Marty's neck, the metal pendant settling on his chest. She kept singing softly throughout. He needs more water, she said. Let's fill this tub up and start praying. She grabbed the plug, put it behind his brother's back, and the water began to rise. Get Tanya. I need her. Cody got up and walked out of the room, following the female voices that led him to his mother's sewing room. Tanya stood in front of the mirror, in a pretty pink dress that tied beneath her breasts to accentuate her shape. Tanya, he said. Chanty needs you. The smile froze on Tanya's face, and she followed him out of the room and back to the bathroom. The bath was full of water now, and Marty's eyelids were flickering as though he was in REM sleep. His color is improving, but he won't wake up, Chanty said. We need to pray. Tanya, get in the bath with him, sit behind him, and wrap your arms around him. Cody, can you help me move him? Tanya didn't hesitate, and climbed in the bath, while Chanty and Cody pushed Marty's naked body up to sit. Tanya shoved her bulky frame in behind him. He moaned as he lay his head back against her shoulder. Tanya, pray with me, Chanty said. The women linked hands, lowered their heads and chanted. We pray to Azulia for help. Goddess of love and creation. She who heals with cold water where she resides. Please help us. They repeated the lines, their eyes flickering as the water began to roll and weave. Waves created by their words washed over Marty, over and over again, until finally there was a huge crescendo of sound. And then there was silence. Cody froze, his heart thundering in his chest as he waited to see what would happen next. Marty began to moan and thrash in the water, and Tanya held him tight, Chanty leaning over to grab hold of his arms. What's happening to him? His mother's scared voice sounded behind him. He had no idea. Marty lurched up and Chanty jumped up, directing his head forward with her hands. He began to vomit. Black, thick, bug-infested spew. Cody looked away, not sure what to do. Pull the plug out, Tanya, Chanty said. Cody sucked in some air. How can I help? He asked, as his brother continued to empty his body of its contents. Hopefully, there would be some of Marty left after this. Run the water, Chanty said, still holding Marty's head. Flush everything away. The bath had a shower head attached at the top as well, so Cody reached up for it, flicking on the water and using the detachable hose to wash away the stink. Tanya was trying to get up, her pretty pink dress now covered in the vile stuff. Here. He reached out for Tanya's hand and helped her to her feet. She stood, her eyes glued to his brother still in the bath. Did it work, Chanty? He was wondering the same thing. He let Tanya go and focused back on his brother, using the hose to rinse his chest, his legs. Marty gagged, but nothing was coming out now. Chanty rubbed his back and reached for the hose. Cody gave it to her, and watched as she washed Marty's hair back from his face and the black water away. Let's get him out and walking around. He was barely conscious and she wanted him to do what? Is that a good idea? He asked. Yes. I want him to get rid of every bit of poison, if he can. But he may keep throwing up, so make sure you take him somewhere where that is possible. Cody nodded and grabbed for the black toweling robe his mom was handing him. Come on, Marty. Stand up. He grabbed his brother under the armpits and hauled him up. Marty's eyes were half open now, and the black smudges beneath were gone. Damn, he looks better. Half dead, but better. Marty jerked and Cody pushed his head toward the bath, where he threw up even more of the blackness. Cody looked away, to Chantelle. Is he going to stop soon? Chantelle's eyes were half closed as she rested against the basin. Yes, I hope so. It'll be a close call, but I think we've done enough. Did performing such a ritual take something out of Chantelle? She looked exhausted. Are you okay? He asked. Yes. Don't worry about me, she said, waving him on. Just go. Get him out into the fresh air. Cody didn't argue with her. He could already see that doing so, both now and in the future, would be futile. He wrapped the bathrobe around his brother and half carried him outside. The moment they fell through the front door, Marty lurched to the side, throwing up on the grass outside their parents' house. Take him into the forest, his mother yelled, and Cody grimaced. His mom loved her garden. If Marty lived to hear about it, he would pay for that later. Come on, he said, lugging his brother toward the trees. They staggered a few more feet, and Cody patted his brother on the back, the cool northerly breeze making his hair prickle on his skin. Perfect. Breathe, Marty. Come on. You want to shift again? He hadn't thought to ask Chantelle about that, but he hoped it would be fine. Just give me a minute, his brother said, his voice croaky and weak. Relief and gratitude filled his soul, and Cody sent up a prayer of thanks. Marty was back. Chantelle had saved him. No problem, he said. We've got time. He bashed Marty on the back again and his brother coughed and hacked, but little more came out. Then Marty took a deep breath and threw back his head, his spine straightening to his full height. Yes? I think shifting would be a good idea. He dropped to the ground and began to change. Cody followed suit. He wasn't letting Marty out of his sight for even a minute. In their wolf forms, they ran off into the woods together, his brother getting faster with each step they took. Cody threw back his head and howled in celebration. His brother was back, and their pack would stay strong.
Chapter 11. Where do you think they'll go? Chantelle asked Cody's mom from inside the main bedroom where they were cleaning up. She stared out the window, watching the two wolves bound off into the dark. Just into the bayou, probably. It is safe there, and the boys know it very well. By the way, my name is Sharon. We didn't get a proper introduction. She gazed at Chantelle, concern creasing her face. Chantelle, come sit. You're still not looking very well. Thank you. She sank into the chair, her legs still unsteady and her head pounding like someone was playing football with her skull. That had been the most intense experience of her life. She'd never sensed evil like it before. Was it really terrible for you, Chantelle? Tanya asked as she walked back into the room, wearing a long t-shirt and new leggings. The poor girl had needed to change out of her new dress. I'm so sorry I couldn't help you more. She reached for Tanya's hand as she walked into the room. Tanya had helped all she could. When they'd both stepped into that dark spell, she'd felt Tanya withdraw. You were protecting your baby, and so you should. But I could feel that darkness. I know. And it was somewhere I've never been, and don't really want to go again. She shuddered and let go of Tanya's hands as Sharon handed her a hot cup of tea. Thank you, Sharon. Do you think Marty will be okay? Sharon asked. Yes, I think so. The poison in his system was pretty toxic, and a whole lot of hatred had been infused into the amulet, but Tanya helped a lot with that. Canceling it out. Her love and her child's love, it all helped. Sharon ambled around the table, then sat down next to Tanya and cupped her face. My son's mate. Part of me thought I'd never live to see the day. Tanya gazed into Sharon's face, and then they embraced, with a sigh that echoed through the room. Chandy's eyes went out of focus and she swayed on her seat. Is there anywhere I can lie down, Sharon? I'm not feeling the best. She needed a couple of moments' peace. Her brain felt like it was swinging around a pole and pounding into the pavement. Of course. Cody's house is just next door. Would you like to go there? She nodded, too exhausted to feign embarrassment. His mother obviously knew what they were to each other. Sharon took her hand and led her next door to a small, well-built house. It was minimally furnished, but clean. Chantelle fell onto the bed she was directed to. Her dreams, dark and haunting, rose up to meet her, foreshadowing dark times to come. Chantelle woke when cold hands touched her skin. She turned to see Cody standing over her, and her racing heart stumbled to a slower pace. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to startle you." "It's okay, I just was dreaming." She didn't want to sit up, so she pulled him down onto the bed with her, his freezing nakedness a relief against her sweaty skin. All those deaths, the evil, the black. Her throat was still tight and sore from her silent screams. "Whoa. You're trembling. What's wrong?" She shook her head, unable to explain except for choking out bad dreams. Cody turned her in his arms and held her tight, offering her his shoulder, literally, to cry on. She gripped tight to his chest, letting her tears flow and her body shake with the stress. It was beautifully cathartic to be able to cling to Cody and let everything go. He didn't say anything, only stroked her hair and held her as she released the tension from the day. So many things had changed in so little time. What would her life be like now? Would she still have a home and a business to go back to, once they found out what she'd done and who she'd sided with? "I'm so scared." "Scared of what?" he asked, kissing the top of her head as he rhythmically stroked down her spine. "Of what's going to happen now. How will I go back to New Orleans?" He rocked her in his arms and she let out a long sigh. Now that she'd said it, she wasn't sure that really was the problem. What was there to go back for? Yes, she loved her home, but what life would she have against those who wanted to hurt her? Tania's family would seek vengeance, and they had powerful allies in New Orleans. "We'll find a way. And no matter what, you have a home here with me and the pack. You saved our alpha. You're one of us now." Chantelle lifted her head and stared at Cody's face, shadowed in the darkness of the room. "Thank you," she said. He kissed her lips gently, his smile visible even in the dark. "Sleep, beautiful girl. You're safe with me." She let the night take her, the body of her huge wolf shifter keeping her safe from the nightmares.
Chapter 12. When the sun rose the next morning, Cody woke to the sexy body of his mate pressed against him, and a huge erection fit to split his clothes apart. "Good morning." Her sweet voice rolled through him as she stretched her back like a sensuous cat and bumped her bum into his pelvis. A groan vibrated through him. "God, don't do that. Or I'll take you here and now." "Fine with me." "Oh, really?" He rolled on top of her and pulled her dress up with one hand, staring down into her beautiful eyes. He dropped his body and let their lips meet, the taste of her so sweet on his lips that he dipped his tongue in further, until his head was spinning from intoxication. When he pulled away, she pushed him and they rolled, her landing on top of him with a cheeky grin. She grabbed the cotton dress she still wore and pulled it up and over her head, dropping it off the side of the bed. Cody sat up and reached behind her, unclipping her black bra and pulling it away from her body. Her full breasts bounced out of their confines, and he ran his hands lovingly over the soft flesh. "Tell me about the mating," she said. "How do we do it?" She ran her hands up and down his chest, her gaze averted as she watched her fingers make a path over his pecs. He swallowed hard before he answered. This was one of those moments he was going to remember for the rest of his life. "We make love, and during climax I bite you. On the shoulder here." He reached up and ran a finger over the flesh between her right shoulder and neck, close to her pulse point. Her eyes lifted and she stared at him. "Will it hurt?" "I honestly don't know. No one has ever told me, but I hope not." Maybe they should wait until he spoke to his mother, or someone else from the pack. A smile spread over her face. "Let's do it then." "Really?" He couldn't believe she was agreeing to mate with him already. He'd assumed, with Chantelle being who she was, that she would want to wait and think about her decision. Yes? I want to begin my life with you. He opened his mouth to ask her another question, then slammed it shut. Why wasn't he jumping her this very second? Come here, he said. He grabbed her and pulled her down to him, wrapping his arms around her back and enjoying the hot press of her breasts to his chest. Beautiful.
Chapter 13. Chantelle awoke and rolled out of bed, reaching for the clothes strewn all over the floor. She would need to buy some new underwear. Cody kept shredding everything she wore. So, what's the plan for today? Cody asked her from the doorway where he leaned against the frame, looking sexier than any man had a right to. She had so many things to do, but which ones did she have control over? First, of course, is to go visit Marty and Tanya, see how they're both doing. Then, I honestly don't know. A hot tightening in her throat warned her of tears and she sniffed, pushing the stress away. Cody smiled at her and pulled on a t-shirt from the dresser. Well, let's go see my brother then. He took her hand and together they walked next door, into the house that still smelled a little like death. There didn't appear to be anyone home. Can you open all the windows and doors? Chantelle asked him, not liking the scent in the air. Cody wrinkled his nose. Absolutely. As one of the doors swung open, Chantelle jumped. Marty. He looked amazingly better. His eyes were clear, his skin a normal shade. He was even walking straight, his full height dominating the room. Good morning. He smiled, his face happy and relaxed. Then Tanya waddled out behind him, her face pink and her eyes dancing. So you guys had a morning very similar to ours. Hi Chantelle, Tanya said with a little wave. Her belly had swelled even further in the night. Chantelle reached out for the babe, running her hands over the bulge. Whoa. Your son is going to be so strong. As usual with her premonitions, she had no idea where the words came from. It's a boy. Tanya's voice lit up with surprise and happiness. Marty came over and ran his hand over his child. Chantelle stepped away, her body tingling with another premonition. This one, not so happy. She wasn't sure Tanya would survive the birth of this wolf shifter baby. Her future was murky, to say the least. I'm sorry, if you didn't want to know. Are you always right? Marty asked. She nodded, unable to say any more. She needed something to eat. Can we have some breakfast? I'm still feeling pretty weak from yesterday. Marty's mouth tipped up at the sides in amusement. You and me both. Chantelle and Tanya sat down at the kitchen table, and Cody pushed his brother into a chair, before turning on the stove and hunting through the fridge. He threw some bacon and eggs, tomatoes and sausages into frying pans, and the smell of oily meat filled the air. A man who can cook. Awesome. Chantelle stood up and with some direction from Marty found the plates, knives, and forks. She finished setting the table just as Cody turned around with plate loads of food. Her stomach grumbled and her mouth filled with saliva. Thanks so much, she said, and Marty and Tanya murmured in agreement. They all dug in, too hungry for more words. If she'd been able to hold intelligent conversation while eating, she would have. They ate every last morsel, and Chantelle groaned as she sat back, her tank officially replenished. That felt incredibly good. She patted her stomach. Yum. Cody grinned at her, wiping his mouth with a napkin. I agree. Needed that after yesterday. Chantelle nodded, turning toward Marty. How are you feeling today? He shrugged, chugging down a glass of juice in a few swallows. Pretty much back to normal, I think. My body feels a bit sluggish, like a hangover or something, and here, I think this is yours. He reached around his neck and pulled off her necklace. She'd forgotten she'd taken that off. It had been years since she hadn't worn it. Maybe that was why she was feeling so flat today. Strange? Oh, thanks. She put the protection amulet back around her neck, sighing as the warmth nestled between her breasts. Marty cleared his throat and leaned forward. I think it is I who needs to thank you. You saved my life. I am forever indebted to you. We all are. The whole pack, Cody said. Me too, Tanya chimed in. Chantelle held up her hands, warding off the unwanted thanks. She didn't see her helping them as a choice, but a calling. It was what she was meant to do, and she was glad for the chance to have a purpose in life. None of you owe me anything. I was very happy to help. It was voodoo that hurt you, and it was my responsibility to do what I could to undo the harm. Tanya reached out and touched her hand, squeezing tight. A wave of dark dread moved through Chantelle and she shivered. Tanya continued. I am so grateful for your help. You didn't have to. No one has to help. And you did. Cody reached over and grabbed her other hand, so she pulled away gently from Tanya and put both hands in Cody's. Warmth and strength refilled her and she sighed in relief. She was home with Cody, and perhaps they should share their good news with his brother. Yeah, well. Tanya, I have a vested interest in the pack too. Tanya looked up from scooting a bite of bread around on her plate with a fork. Huh. Cody laughed and put an arm around her. Chantelle's my mate, and we completed the mating last night. Chantelle beamed up at Cody and pulled her dress to the side so they could see the bite on her shoulder. It had hurt much less than she expected. Instead, she had experienced the most amazing orgasm of her life. You're what? Tanya and Marty asked at the same time, and then looked at each other and laughed. Yep, there must be something in the water around here. She turned her head as Cody pressed his lips to hers. Marty cleared his throat. You mean there's something in the fates? It can't be a coincidence that Tanya and you are meant to be part of our pack. She thought so too. And although part of her had expected to feel different after mating with Cody, she didn't. She felt settled and happy. Was that how it was meant to be? Cody said she would be strong, like him. So, when did her superhuman strength kick in? Cody grinned back at his brother and shrugged. Yeah, true. She swallowed hard, mentally debating the wisdom of telling Tanya and the group what she saw in Tanya's future. When do you think that baby will come, Tanya? You're getting bigger by the hour. I know. She ran her hands lovingly over the huge bump. And to think, only a few days ago she'd asked to get rid of it. The normal gestation for a wolf shifter is 2 lunar months, they said, and I conceived this baby, what was it? 5 weeks ago? Yeah, Marty interrupted. But being an alpha-born, our babies tend to be born on the full moon, which is next week. Is labor hard for your kind? Chantelle asked, picking at a piece of bacon rind she'd left on the plate. No, not at all. She lifted her head and stared at Tanya, who still looked pale, despite Marty's recovery. Tanya cocked her head, staring at her with searching eyes. What's wrong, Chantelle? Oh. Nothing. Despite everything she'd been taught, and all the secrets she'd kept over the years, her face still gave her away too often. Is something going to happen to me, Chantelle? What aren't you saying? Chantelle glanced away and Marty reached over and grabbed her arm. Cody growled, and Chantelle jerked back as he knocked Marty's hand from her arm. He leaned in at his brother, snarling. That was good to know. Cody would protect her from anyone, even his own family. Marty gave a deep, threatening growl, locking his gaze with Cody. Chantelle took a deep breath. There was no way around the truth. She would need to be prepared, and so would they. I'm not sure how the birth is going to go, Tanya. Tanya's eyes widened, her face paling. Chantelle bit her lip. Both of the men retreated to look at Chantelle, scowling. What are you talking about? Marty demanded, wrapping an arm around his mate's shoulders. Excuse me. Her stomach rolled with nausea. She was going to throw up. She ran for the bathroom, making it just in time before losing her beautiful breakfast and too many calories to count. Gross. She washed out her mouth with water and then ventured back into the kitchen, still feeling sick but under control. Tanya raised an eyebrow. What? Chanty asked, taking her seat again. Tanya smirked at her. You pregnant too? No. Of course not. They'd only made love twice. Unprotected. Oh crap. But it's only been a few days since the first time. Tanya settled back in her chair, rubbing her big belly. That's how fast it settles in. Remember, 9 months worth in a matter of weeks. Her eyes found Cody's. Oh no. Not now. We'll deal with that later, she said. You're more important at the moment, Tanya. She straightened her spine, trying hard not to focus on the fact that nausea was rolling in her belly and struggling with the fear that there was a child, at this very minute, growing exponentially inside of her. What's going to happen? Tanya asked, lifting her chin, a proud and strong woman even in the face of possible death. I'm not sure. Tanya rolled her eyes and looked away. Obviously, she didn't believe Chanty. I'm serious. It's cloudy. Your labor is going to be hard, life-threatening. Your baby will be healthy and strong, but I just can't see what happens to you. I'm sorry. Tanya looked up at Marty, who rose to his feet to stand next to her. His hand rested on her shoulder. His jaw clenched. Maybe you should book into the private hospital in New Orleans, Chanty said. They can handle any bleeding or... Marty held up a hand. No. That is not our way. Chanty frowned at Marty's tone. Would he really put Tanya at risk just because he didn't like hospitals? Anger heated her skin and she stood up, facing off against the alpha leader of the wolf shifter pack. She could die, Marty. The doctors at the hospital could save her. But even as she said it, she saw a vision of Tanya's parents' red fire. No. I take it back. I'm sorry. That's not an option either. Then what do we do, Chanty? Tanya asked, her voice small. She closed her eyes and felt out the different options. New Orleans, her parents, Chanty's own home, the shop, the bayou. There was only one path that held light at the end of the tunnel. And that was Marty's home. The bayou. And Chanty must be there to guide the babe into the world. I can only see one birth where there's a chance Tanya survives, and it's here. With me and perhaps any other healers you have. Like Daniel. A brighter light shone in her mind as she envisioned Daniel helping her. Her eyes popped open. Yes, that is the only way. Can you do that, Tanya? Tanya nodded, gripping Marty's hand where it held her shoulder. Yes. Of course I can. All right, Chanty said, beginning to clear the table. We're in for a big week of planning then. Not to mention, I need to go back to my shop for some supplies. I'll take you, Cody said, joining her. His strength, as always, was a constant in her life that she could now count on. Thank you. She stared hard at her mate, absorbing the beautiful energy he sent her way. This week was already one of the most intense of her life, and she had the feeling it wasn't over yet. Cody took her into New Orleans the next night, and she grabbed her most valuable family possessions and some medicines from her shop. She wasn't sure what she'd expected, but what she saw when she got home wasn't exactly a welcome. Goat blood had been poured onto her stoop, both at her shop and her family home. She climbed in a side window, unable to cross over such a horrible omen. Mary and her husband knew she'd helped Tanya escape, and there would be hell to pay for that choice. Despite the severity of the punishment that she knew would be coming, it was something she wasn't going to worry about until after the full moon. Tanya and her baby were the only things Chanty was focused on, and they took all her energy. Over the next few days, she stayed on high alert and learnt what she could from the pack. Cody had told her she would grow strong like him, and although she still couldn't lift anything substantial on her own, she was feeling better. Stronger. In her mind. Which gave her some optimism for the days to come. It was late in the afternoon on Wednesday when the hairs on Chanty's body began standing on end. She was sitting at the dining room table, reading a book. She looked up and glanced out the window. From there, she could see the full moon rising in the distance, and a shudder racked her frame. It's coming tonight, isn't it, Chanty? Tania's voice trembled as she sat down beside her. Chanty stood up and moved to the table. She began grinding up herbs and ingredients for more potions, blood tonics, salves, and protection amulet ingredients. She'd been cooking and mixing and sewing all week. Yes. Are you ready? She asked the beautiful girl beside her, putting strength into her voice. Tanya nodded once, her hugely swollen belly rolling and dancing in front of their eyes. He will be here soon. Chanty ran her palm over Tania's son, the flesh of Tania's belly contorting and moving beneath her hand. You're so beautiful. Tanya smiled, the picture of a Madonna in her element. Are you pregnant too, Chanty? Do you know yet? I'm not sure, she lied. She was very sure, but she wasn't sharing that information today. I haven't missed a period yet, but I've been sick most days. Then you're pregnant, Tanya said with confidence. These wolf shifter pregnancies are quite different. They're... She gasped, her voice hitched, then she hissed out her breath and slid her hands around her belly. Whoa, he's kicking a lot today. Chanty nodded and kept up her preparations. She couldn't think too much of the lives that tonight would literally be in her hands. Over the week, she'd made amulets and necklaces for everyone in the pack. Men, women, children. There was a storm coming, a fight. She wasn't sure when or who would bring it. But what she did know was she would protect these people with everything she had. She stopped mixing and looked at Tanya. There was so much she wanted to say, but how to summarize it all? You need to keep your mind focused tonight, Tanya. Okay. I know you are young and you will be scared. But this is your destiny. There is no other reason that this has happened to you. Don't give up. Never give up. Do you understand? Tanya nodded, fear clear in her bright eyes. I mean it, Tanya. Hold on to anything that is a strong anchor for you. Your love for your son, your bond with Marty. Your need to be there for your child as he grows. Anger at your parents, anything. Pick one thing. One thing that's worth fighting for, worth living for, and imprint it into this. She handed a braided charm she had made to Tanya. Tanya took it with trembling fingers. Thank you. I'm not sure which one to choose. You don't have to tell me. Just take the bracelet, meditate on it, and when you have chosen, put it on. And remember, it doesn't have to be what you think it should be. You don't have to be selfless, or a martyr. Hatred can sometimes work just as well as love, better even. Look inside yourself and find a reason to still be alive tomorrow. And you will be. Tanya took a deep breath in through her nose, her eyes clearing like the clouds parting on a summer day. Yes. She had it. Thank you. I'll see you after dinner. Chanty let her go and continued to grind and make pastes and drinks. Tanya was going to bleed, she knew that. She'd made blood-building tonics and special bandages to aid with clotting. She wasn't sure what she was going to be up against, but she had an arsenal. After a lovely dinner in Cody's house, cooked by her lovely mate, they went to bed. Affection amongst the wolves was a high priority, and Cody often whisked her away to cuddle or make love. Life was truly a dream at the moment. They lay in bed, facing each other and stroking each other's skin. Do you think tonight will go as you've foreseen? Cody asked. They discussed her visions a lot during the week, and she still wasn't sure which ones would come to fruition or not. She'd had so many, and seen so many things happen to the baby and Tanya. It was hard to identify the right road to take. I honestly don't know, but all day I've had the strangest feeling something is coming. More than just what's going on with Tanya and Marty. Maybe her parents have organized an assault. Maybe some of the black arts practitioners are going to attack? You'll be ready, won't you, Cody? He nodded. Yes. We already increased the guards, and maybe I should speak to the women about removing the children into the bayou for a week. A strange coolness passed over her, and she let the words sent from another place flow through her. Whatever's going to happen, it's going to be tonight. The bloodlines will mingle forever or both will fall. She shook herself hard as the premonition poured out of her. Oh damn. I think you need to go speak to everyone now. It's all happening tonight. Fuck. If it wasn't enough fighting to keep Tanya alive, she had to deal with the whole pack being in danger as well. Cody. Chantelle. Marty's urgent voice echoed through their small house. Cody and Chanty looked at each other in understanding and rolled away from each other to get up. Luckily, they were clothed for once and jumped up off the bed just as Marty came rushing in through the door. You're here. Good. Tanya needs you. The baby's coming. Chanty grabbed the bags she had ready by the front door and looked at Cody. You need to warn the pack. I will. You deal with my sister-in-law and my nephew. Go back to Tanya, Marty. I'm right behind you, Chanty told him, and Marty raced back to his mate. Cody pulled her in hard against his body, kissing her deeply and fast. His taste exploded through her senses, knocking what fear she was feeling to the side. When he pulled back, she stumbled a little, and he grabbed her. Look after yourself, Chanty. And our bub. He lay a hand against her slightly rounded belly. She swallowed hard and nodded once. It had been an unspoken agreement between them not to mention her possible pregnancy until a safe time. But as he stared at her, she knew how scared he was. I will. Make sure you're still alive in the morning, Cody. I'm not doing this on my own. He grinned and winked at her, as though he didn't have a care in the world. Cheeky devil. Deal. He turned and ran out of the room with Marty. Chapter 14. Chanty checked her bag once more for all the medicines she'd created for Tanya. Then, taking a heavy, deep breath, she walked out of their house and went straight to Marty's house next door. As she strolled down the dirt road, which was the main street in their little shanty town, she realized how happy she was. It was amazing how quickly she'd adapted to life out here. She would never have thought she could do without all the conveniences of New Orleans, and maybe long-term she would miss it. But for the moment, she was incredibly happy helping people who needed her, and being loved by a man who was perfect for her. Cody seemed to adore her. And that was an incredible thing. A lot of the men she dated in the past had been intimidated by her power or her abilities. And within the voodoo religion, she was considered a priestess of sorts, and that came with it an untouchable quality that she had often wished was not there. Especially during those many, many cold winter nights. Cody said he loved her, and for the first time in her life, she actually believed him when he said it. He admired her ability to heal and help people, and couldn't get enough of touching her and kissing her. He was strong and powerful, and yet didn't try to dominate or control her. It was a dream come true in many ways. A deep guttural moan echoed through the house as she pushed through the door of Marty's house and paused. Tonight would be more important than she was allowing herself to admit. What had her prophecy meant? Who would fall? What was meant to combine and mingle? Whose bloodlines? Did it mean that the strength of the pack was determined by Tanya's baby? A child whose bloodlines had already mixed those of a voodoo mother and a wolf shifter father? She honestly didn't know, but her mission tonight was to keep Tanya alive. She pulled herself together and moved through the small, neat house and found Tanya and Sharon in the bedroom. Tanya was pacing and Sharon sat on the bed, her already prematurely aged face looking ancient with stress. How's everything going, Tanya? Chanty asked, placing her bags down on the dresser. Tanya gave her a look, rolling her eyes while sweat beaded on her forehead. This is harder than I thought it would be already. Chanty smiled as the adrenaline kicked in and everything around her slowed down. She opened her bag and took out a natural painkiller she'd concocted. It would help Tanya get through this. I've made you something to help with the pain. I'll go mix it with some water and bring it to you. Oh, thank you. Tanya smiled, her face relaxing. Chanty ducked out of the room and got the potion ready. Sometimes her patients just needed to know that someone was there to help. That they could trust something outside of their own body, which was betraying them by giving them a huge amount of pain. And that was one of her main weapons. Hope. It trumped almost everything. Although this root mixture would help the physical pain, as there was a calming agent mixed in too. Here you go. She handed the glass to Tanya, who downed the contents in a few gulps. She grimaced as she handed the glass back. That's terrible. Chantelle laughed. Since when is our medicine nice tasting? Tanya grinned back. Ah, never. She grimaced as another pain hit, holding her breath. Just keep breathing, Tanya. You're doing beautifully. You need to envision what's happening in your body. The cervix is opening up to let your baby out, so each contraction that comes through, visualize the tissues and relax into it. The herbs will help you. Tanya nodded, and Chantelle went to fetch her another glass of water. Tanya was still too pale, her skin damp and cold to the touch. Despite everything, the werewolves and Cody believed in fate, but Chantelle wasn't sure Tanya was strong enough to get through this. Only time would tell if she was wrong.
Chapter 15. Cody walked up to his brother and put a hand on his shoulder. We need to get the children out of town. Put them in a few cars and drive them to Cranji. Cranji was the next town over, about an hour south. Marty frowned, his lips thinning into compressed lines. What are you talking about, Cody? Chantelle's had a premonition, and there's going to be a fight tonight. She thinks the voodoo community and the witches might be coming for us. Marty's eyes narrowed, cynicism etched into his face. How would she know this? She's a voodoo priestess, Marty. Why wouldn't she? And don't give me that look. Marty should have been looking worried, not pondering Chantelle's motives in telling them this information. Chantelle has done nothing but earn our trust, Cody said. You owe her big time. And if she's right about this, we'll owe her again. He stared hard at his brother. It was difficult not to point out the fact that Marty was the reason they were all in danger. Marty had managed his mate badly, gotten caught, and almost died. Marty crossed his arms over his chest, his jaw tightening in a stubborn set. Cody began to feel frustrated. Oh, come on, it's one night. If she's wrong, we bring them back in the morning. There were only 11 children under 16 in the town. It wasn't too difficult to move them to safety. Marty sighed, shoulders sagging. All right. Get one of the Davidson brothers to round them up, and take the minivan. Good. And you need to get the men up and aware. There could be people coming. But what about Tanya? I need to be here for her. Tanya needs Chantelle, and she has Mom too. We have a pact to protect Marty. He shouldn't have to remind his brother of that, but Cody tried not to be too critical of him. He didn't really understand how his brother was feeling. His mate was in labor, and his son would be here by morning, with or without his mate's life intact. But why would they choose to attack on a night like this? Marty asked, hesitating at the door. We are at our most powerful on the full moon. Cody hadn't thought about that. And he didn't have an answer. Marty, we're wasting time. I couldn't even begin to understand the workings of those people who tried to kill you and Tanya. So please just get moving. I'll meet you at the edge of the forest in half an hour. He slapped his brother on the back and went in search of Terry Davidson. He was their teacher and a great guy. He found Terry at home eating dinner. Terry. I need your help. Terry, who was in his 50s and wouldn't be much help in a fight, got up from the table and came straight to the door. Of course, Cody. What do you need? There's a fight coming, and we need someone to get the kids to safety. Terry's eyes widened, then his jaw set. I'll organize the minivan and pick up all the already sleeping children. I have some family in Myrtle, it's 2 hours away, but my sister has enough beds and food for all of us. I'll bring the children back when the coast is clear. Which was probably better than trying to find somewhere to sleep in Cranji. Thanks, Terry. Terry headed off to get the keys, and start rounding everyone up. Cody turned back to the woods, the light of the full moon calling to him. Her power was beautiful, the strength she brought to their pack a magnificent gift. His skin tingled as his wolf prowled inside him, knowing that soon he would be called to take over Cody's body. To stretch his legs and enjoy the freedom that came with the one night of the month, they had no choice but to surrender to their animals. Maybe that was why the New Orleans people would come tonight. Maybe they believed the full moon would make them less lucid, and they would go running into the woods, leaving Tanya and the other women alone. Not likely. It was pretty obvious the New Orleans people didn't understand how shifting worked, and the fact that they had full control of their wolves. He could see his brother in the distance, standing by the wood's edge, a strange red-orange glow framing him. Oh fuck. Marty. Fire. He started running toward his brother. Marty growled, the shift overcoming him as he bounded toward the edge of their town. Marty had shifted by the time Cody reached him, the massive black wolf standing guard as the people of New Orleans ran toward them, fiery torches in hand. Cody threw back his head and howled, calling to the other men in the pack. Marty joined him, and Cody felt the pack running up behind them. Surround the town. Don't let them near Marty's home. They want Tanya. And Chantelle. He sent out the message via the telepathic connection he had to the dozen or so wolves that had joined them on the hill, and they took off in opposite directions. The men charged their torches high. A gunshot rang out. Oh fuck. They're shooting to kill. Take them down. Marty stumbled and Cody ran to his brother. You okay? Yeah. Flesh wound. Let's go. Cody pushed aside any human feelings he had and ran at the men shooting at them. A bullet zinged past his head. He dove and weaved around the trees, then kept running. One of the men was up ahead. He had a bald head and dark skin. Cody jumped and flew through the air. Fire seared his shoulder as another shot filled the air, but he landed on target. Teeth bared, he ripped through the man's throat. Hot metallic blood spurted between his lips. He growled and bit down, the man making a strange gurgling sound before his body went floppy. Cody dropped the body, again pushing the humanity inside his mind to the background. It was screaming at him for the bloody murder. He shot at me. Isn't that self-defense? Shut up. Focus. Marty. Where are you? Marty. When his brother didn't reply, Cody started running back toward the town. No matter what, the most important thing was to keep their people safe. A huge black wolf flew through the air, his face covered in red blood. Marty ripped through the hunter he'd been aiming for, and the noise began to fade. Less gunshots, and then even less. It became almost too quiet. Eerily so. Marty panted over the man's dead body. Cody started toward him. A high-pitched scream filled the air. A female scream. Damn. No. Marty and Cody turned and bolted back to Marty's house. There were 3 dead wolves on the way and Cody cringed, tears imminent for his fallen family. But he kept running. As the house came into view, cold dread iced its way through Cody's gut. The place was surrounded by strangers. God. No. What do we do? Kill them all, Marty replied. His brother by his side, Cody charged. He ran full tilt at the people in front of his brother's house. He had to get to Chantelle. His mate was inside and she was probably hurt. Or worse. The people ahead of him weren't paying attention to them. They had their heads bowed, and their lips were muttering something incoherent. Heat seared his chest like someone had lit it on fire and he stumbled, falling to the ground. His brother flew off into a nearby home. Cody gasped for air, pain unlike anything he'd ever felt squeezing at his chest. He reached forward, dragging himself along the dirt. What had happened? Where was everyone? A big black man walked up next to him, and Cody bared his teeth, growling as menacingly as he could. The man lifted a large silver dagger. Cody's heart pounded hard against his ribs. His human brain screamed at him to move, but he couldn't even get up. His legs were weighted down, and he could barely feel them. What sorcery was this? The huge man above him grunted, and the knife came down with a flash of light, straight into his heart.
Chapter 16. Chandy's whole body seized up with pain, and she dropped to her knees on the floor. Her mind screamed out. But at what? What had happened? Chanty. What's wrong? Sharon asked as she mopped Tania's brow with a cool washcloth. Chanty gasped for air, her whole ribcage feeling as though it was in a vice being squeezed tighter and tighter. Something terrible had happened. I don't know. I don't know. Tanya grunted and groaned, her panting becoming faster. Mary, Tania's mother, along with at least 3 other members of the sanction, burst into the room suddenly, crowding her. What the hell are you doing here? Chanty panted, trying to deal with the pain coursing through her body and the fact that the woman they'd been hiding from had found them. Mary spun on Chanty. Help her, or I swear to God I'll... Chanty pushed herself to her feet and glared at the old witch. Or you'll what? Her heart was pounding so hard in her chest, she was pretty sure she was about to be sick. Cody had just been hurt, badly. She was almost certain of it. The rest of the town was dying as they spoke, and Tanya was minutes away from birthing a child that could kill her. At this rate, he probably would kill her. There was blood everywhere. Mary's gaze swung from Chanty to the bed where her daughter was writhing and screaming in pain, then back. Just, please. Part of Chanty wanted to step away from the birthing bed and let Tania's mother try to fix everything. But if she left, Chanty was convinced that would mean letting Tanya die. And if she knew anything about what would happen tonight, it was that she was meant to be here, in this room, helping to birth one of the next alphas of this pack. Chanty narrowed her eyes at Mary. Get me Marty. And Cody. Who? Mary asked. And why? Tania's mate and mine. Chanty growled. I had a vision yesterday, and they are involved somehow. The bloodlines. I'm not sure. But I need them. Mary's face screwed up into an ugly twist. I don't even know what they look like. I doubt that very much. Take Sharon and go now. We need them. Tanya let out an unearthly cry and her mother jumped, rushing to her side. Mary grabbed her daughter's hand and brought it to her lips. I'm here now. Chanty inhaled sharply, watching the transaction. Despite everything she knew about Mary and how terrible a person she was, it was obvious the ties to her child ran deep. Chanty turned to Sharon. I'm sorry to have to ask you to do this, Sharon, but it's really important. No matter what, dead or alive, bring them back. Both of them. Take some of the men in case they need to be carried. Sharon nodded, her lips turned down and a streak of bright red blood covering her cheek. All right. Let's go. Sharon walked out of the room, past the voodoo witches with her head held high. Mary soon followed her. Gah! Help me please, Tanya screamed, writhing on the bed as her child tried desperately to enter the world. Chanty turned back to her patient and tried to focus. She could literally feel the adrenaline in her system keeping her standing, her muscles cramping and her heart pounding. She took a few fortifying breaths. Now that Mary and some of the others had left, she could breathe again. She lifted up Tania's blood-soaked dress and peered at the entrance to her womb. I can see the baby's head, Tanya. You're going to need to push. Slowly, carefully. Or you'll rip yourself apart. I can't, Chanty. I can't. Tanya was lying flat on the bed, and her legs were shaking with the strain. Come on, sweetheart. You need to sit up or stand. Can you do that? Nothing. Tanya? Nothing. Tanya? Chanty raced around the bed and jumped onto it, pulling Tanya up, lifting her limp head. Tanya made no effort to move herself. Come on, Tanya. You're going to die if you don't get this baby out. Don't you understand? The door swung open and Sharon walked in, tears streaming down her weathered face. I found them. Two voodoo men walked into the room and practically threw Marty's bloodied human body onto the floor. Is he alive? She asked, her heart breaking for the family before her. Barely begun, and yet all three of them on the verge of death. Marty coughed and spluttered, rolling from side to side on the floor. Marty! Chantelle yelled, desperate now. You need to get up. Help me with Tanya. Please. Sharon. Hurry. Sharon sobbed as she bent down and put her arms around Marty. He groaned as he rolled and fell down again. Help him! Chantelle screamed at the other men in the room. They didn't move, so instead it was left to Sharon to put her body under her son's chest and force him up. He got to his knees, then collapsed across the bed. Chantelle's heart broke, but there wasn't time for pity now. Marty! Get up! He lifted his head, his eyes clearing as he focused on the woman in front of him. Horror filled his face. Tanya? Get up here, Chantelle commanded. Behind her. Wake her up. Make her fight. She motioned to Sharon and Marty to come closer, to push Tanya up. Tanya. Please wake up. Marty begged as he crawled over the blood-soaked mattress and ran his hand over his mate's exhausted body. You need to get the baby out. Please, Tanya. Don't give up. Chantelle gripped the bracelet she'd given to Tanya, hoping to call to it to activate whatever was needed. Nothing happened. You need to do something, Marty. Bite her or something, I don't know. What do you wolves do? She went back to her place between Tanya's thighs, the baby's head bulging like a purple melon. Push, Tanya, come on. Get your baby out. A heavy thump behind her made her freeze, a cold dread climbing up her spine like a ghost's hand. She turned very slowly, and before her lay her worst fears, a gray wolf. Her gray wolf. Unmoving. Dead. On the floor. Cody. She stared at the dark man standing over her mate, a blood-covered small sword in his hand. Anger swirled inside her like never before, a terrible volcano of hate and blackness consuming her mind. No. She stepped around her mate, and without thought on what she did or how she did it, she swung both hands out and back together, hitting the man on both sides of his neck. He sank to his knees. Another voodoo man that had been standing by the door rushed her. She whirled and screamed, pushing out her palms and feeling for the first time the true extent of her magic. She wasn't just a voodoo practitioner, she was so much more. Maybe she was a witch, maybe something else. But at that moment she could feel the power of her wolf mate, of her ancestors. Her mate was dead, and she had inherited all of his power. And in this moment, she knew they all deserved to die. She screamed out, and flashes of light bolted out of her palms, exploding into the 4 voodoo people around her. They all fell to the floor like their air had been let out. Dead? Knocked out? She didn't care. She squatted down and put both hands on Cody. She closed her eyes, tears flowing inside her soul. There was no pulse, no rhythmic breath. Power bubbled inside her, the protection amulet on her neck burning and pulsing. She took it off and lay it onto Cody's blood-soaked fur. She searched for the source and pressed her fingers into the large wound in his chest. She reached over to her bag that lay on the floor near the bed and pulled out a poultice and a knife. When had she put that in there? She looked down at her own forearm and ran the knife over her skin, pressing down hard. The pain didn't register, as her blood ran onto the poultice like she was watching it happen to someone else. When the poultice was soaked, she pressed it against Cody's wound, her heart pumping madly in her chest. Chantelle. Help us. The screams of Sharon and Marty burst through the cloud of silence enveloping her, and she turned back. This baby needs to come out now. Marty, Chantelle said, deadly calm now. Wake her up. Now. Marty, who was sitting on the bed behind his comatose mate, growled, baring his teeth as he sunk them into Tanya's shoulder. She gasped and moaned, pushing up and away from the intense pain. Her eyelids fluttered and Chantelle saw her chance. She reached inside Tanya's body, putting her fingers around the head of the baby. Tanya, I don't know what you chose to give you strength, but you need it now. Marty's here and your babe is stuck. Please, Tanya. Push. Tanya struggled to sit up further, and Sharon and Marty helped her. Marty ran his tongue over the bite on Tanya's shoulder, sealing it shut. That's pretty amazing. Tanya groaned and grunted, her huge body heaving as she pushed down. The baby's head bulged. I can see it, Chantelle said. Keep going, Tanya. The baby's head pushed forth, coming into her hands. There was a twist and a scream as Tanya worked to get her baby born. The baby's shoulders slid forth, and then the baby slithered out like a dolphin, wet and covered in blood. It's a boy, Chantelle cried out, holding the infant tight. He was slippery and purple. Chantelle placed him down on the blanket she had prepared, wrapping him up and putting a tie on the cord. The placenta wriggled out, all red and pulsing. And just as relief surged in Chantelle's heart, the trickling of blood from Tanya turned into a gush. Tanya? Tanya? Wake up! Marty was yelling now, shaking his mate as her eyes rolled back in her head. No. 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 Chantelle chanted, panic making her arms shake. The baby mewled and cried, wriggling in all of his purple-red glory. Thank God for that. He's alive. She handed the baby to Sharon and pushed her to leave the room. Go. Quickly. Chantelle turned back to the bed to see tears streaming down Marty's face as he held Tanya's lifeless body in his arms. Chapter 17. Sweat ran down Chantelle's face. What the fuck could she do to save Tanya when she'd already tried everything she knew? There were dead or unconscious people everywhere. A vision of wolf-shifter teeth and blood emerged from a hidden area inside her brain. Marty's saliva. It healed his bite. Could it do that for all wounds? Marty sobbed, shaking Tanya as she lay in his arms. Marty. Can you heal her? With your... She motioned to her mouth. You know. Seal her wounds like you did with the bite? Marty looked up, dark smudges beneath his eyes. I think so. She's my mate, so. She grabbed his arm and tugged. Come on then. The baby tore her apart. See if you can close up her wounds. She remembered her own foretelling words. Whatever's going to happen, it's going to be tonight. The bloodlines will mingle forever or both will fall. He needs to use his blood too. Marty. Can you cut your arm or something? Mingle some of your blood with hers too, okay? He nodded as he eased Tanya down and moved to the space between her legs. Their baby had mingled their blood together already, so hopefully they didn't need any more, but may as well cover all the bases. Marty partially shifted, his face turning wolf-shifter-like as he began to clean his mate's body. Chantelle turned to her own mate, kneeling down beside him. She pulled back the poultice she'd applied to his chest and gasped. Her heart Acheda's renewed hope fluttered through her system. The gaping wound was gone. There was still life in him. She lay her hand down on his blood-soaked chest. Was that a heartbeat? She rushed to twist around and lay her head against his chest. Her stomach dropped. No heartbeat. But she could hear something. An echo. Maybe? Was she imagining it? It didn't matter. She pushed herself up and grabbed for her bag. She glanced over to Tanya and saw the bleeding had stopped, and Marty was pulling her to sitting. Her head lolled around, and her complexion was pale as cream. But she was alive. Just... Here. Make her drink this. She threw Marty a bottle of blood tonic and went back to searching through her bag. What do I use? What do I use? May as well throw everything at him. She pulled out every amulet and health charm she had and placed them down on him. She sprinkled healing potions and herbs on his body, all over his matted dark hair and his long limbs. It was strange trying to heal a wolf, but she could still see him. Her Cody. Nothing happened. She put her head down and prayed. Jesus, please help the man I love. Loa, please help him. He is a good man. She opened her eyes. Why the hell wasn't this working? Because bringing people back from the dead is only for those practicing the black arts. No. No. She was not losing this fight. Blood. She needed more of her blood. But what if she hurt her baby? No. Cody would never forgive her if she bled herself to the point of damaging their child. But maybe, just a little of her blood closer to the baby. She grabbed the knife and lifted her top. Her hand didn't even tremble as she slid the knife across her lower abdomen, where a C-section would open her if she needed one. Pain broke through her threshold as the adrenaline that had been keeping her going all day began to run out. She gasped as tears ran down her face. Bright red blood spilled forth and she cupped her hand, gathering the blood there. Cody had other injuries. His shoulder had been blasted apart. She moved her hand across and pressed her blood to his. Then she shuffled down to gather more and spread it over every injury he had, her stomach dropping each time she took some of her life form and passed it to her mate. Her eyes were drooping and sweat covered her shaking body. She didn't care. Anything if it would save him. When she was done, she grabbed a poultice and applied it to her cut. Before her eyes, the wounds began to heal, and she put both palms together and linked her fingers in a prayer position, but she wasn't praying anymore. Time to fight. She raised both arms up in the air and brought them down on his chest. Hard. Pain ricocheted up her arms. Come on, Cody. Bang. She hit him again. Come back to me. She hit him again, her head spinning with fatigue and her arms like lead weights. One more, a voice in her head whispered. She didn't have much left in her. She raised her arms and stared straight at the ribs over the heart that she desperately wanted to beat again, and with all her strength, she brought them down as hard as she could. Cody jerked, a strange moan rolling from his animal throat. Is he alive? Marty yelled from the bed. She put her head to his chest and there it was. The sweetest sound in all the world. A steady, thumping heartbeat. Yes. The fur began to disappear, golden skin reappearing before her tear-blurred gaze. Cody's face transformed and there before her lay her mate. Her muscles turned to jelly, and she slid to the floor beside him. She lay an arm over his chest and wept.
Chapter 18. Cody had been swimming in black ink, his head barely above the water. But sunshine appeared, then an arm reached out to him and pulled him to the shore. It was his mate, her perfect skin and rose birthmarks glinting in the sunshine. Was she an angel helping him to heaven? Everything hurt. Nope. Not heaven. He wouldn't hurt this much if he was away with the gods. He opened his eyes and he wasn't on a beach, nor was there any water anywhere to be seen. But he was alive. Chanty sobbed against him. Were they on the floor? Chanty. The sobbing stopped, and she lifted her head, her tear-streaked, exhausted face the most beautiful sight he'd ever seen. Are you back? Really back? She climbed on top of him, her boiling hot body almost too hot to touch. But he did, reaching up for her flaming face. Yes? What happened? He asked. Her face crumpled and she collapsed onto his chest, her wet tears streaming down his skin. He wrapped his arms around her and kissed the top of her head. It's all right. Shish? He didn't remember much. They'd been fighting the New Orleans voodoo people, and the other, had someone stabbed him? Oh fuck. Are Tanya and the baby okay? Chanty nodded against his chest and pushed back so that she sat next to him. He tried to get up, but his body wouldn't work. Damn. What had happened to him? She wrapped a hand around his arm and pulled. He gripped hard and got himself seated, his head spinning with the effort as pain exploded through his gut. Shit. He was naked, but that wasn't unusual considering the amount of times he'd shifted. Where is everyone? He asked. We're over here, Marty called from the bed. Carefully, and with a prickling like pain tugging at every cell in his body, Cody pushed himself to his feet. He wavered, his knees like jelly. Chantelle tucked herself under his shoulder, and they limped to the couch opposite the bed. They landed, and he almost passed out again, the exhaustion in his muscles making him feel like he would be able to sleep for a week after this. What on earth had happened? He looked over at the bed and gasped. Tanya was covered from the waist down in blood. "Where's the baby?" Cody asked. "Had the infant survived?" "I sent him off with your mom," Chantelle said, still clinging to his side. "We should go tell her everything's okay." Chantelle pushed herself to her feet and staggered out of the room, tripping and falling against the door. Cody sat forward. "You okay?" She didn't answer as she hurried off, so Cody turned back to his brother, who was covering his dirty mate in kisses. Even Marty's face was covered in blood. "Is someone going to fill me in? I seem to have missed a whole chunk of time." Marty chuckled, his eyes still on his mate. Then he turned around, his eyes sparkling with a crazy type of happiness. "You didn't just miss time. You died, brother." "I what?" "Impossible. Chantelle brought you back, don't ask me how. And she helped me save Tanya. And our son. She's a pretty incredible woman you have there." A lump lodged itself in Cody's throat. "How?" he asked, looking toward Tanya for the answer. Tanya shrugged. "I have no idea. Your brother was busy saving me from death, but Chantelle comes from some pretty incredible lines of voodoo women. Fuck, what a night." Cody laughed. How could he not? The whole world had turned on its axis. He looked around the room. There were people everywhere, fallen like dead flies. What's with all the people? Tanya glanced over, her face creasing with worry. "They're all friends of my parents, and that's my mom." She pointed to the woman in the corner. "I'm not sure what happened to them." Marty chuckled. It was Chantelle again. "Not sure what happened there, but she got pretty angry, and then they all fell." "Incredible, actually." Cody shook his head in wonder. The door opened and Chantelle stepped back in, followed by his mother, who was cradling a small whimpering bundle in her arms. "You're all alive." "I don't believe it." There were tears on his mother's face as she handed the babe to his mother. Tanya pushed aside the material covering her and offered her breast to her son. He latched on quickly and the small cries stopped. Sharon caressed Tanya's face and then moved over to Cody, embracing him with a tight hold. "My son, I am so thankful you came back to us." He let his eyes close as his mother's love washed over him. She had never been very demonstrative in her feelings. A classic alpha mate, she was hard and strong. "I love you," she whispered as she pulled away. Cody reached for Chantelle's hand, tugging her back down onto the couch with him. She looked like she'd flown through a hurricane. She smelled of blood and sweat, fear and exhaustion. "I owe you my life," he said, bringing her hand to his heart. A smile trembled on her full lips. "I love you. I couldn't let you go," Chantelle said, and they were the sweetest words he'd ever heard. He pulled her in close for a kiss, her distinctive flavor lost amongst the day's events. "Shall we go home and shower?" he asked, needing to get clean and close to her. She nodded and stood up. As they walked past the people on the ground, Chantelle stopped to check them. "Are they dead?" he asked. She shook her head. "No. Thank the heavens. I didn't want to kill them. But they were posing a threat and well, I don't really know. But they got knocked out." He walked ahead, keeping her behind him. How much time had gone by? Was there still a threat? How are the other wolves? Is there still a fight going on? She shrugged, her eyes wide and alert as they moved to the front of the house and pushed the door open. He tensed, uncertain what to expect. There was nothing unusual he could see yet. "Let's walk down to our place, but keep your eyes open," he said. They crept along the road, but they didn't see anything. Someone had come along and collected the bodies, that was obvious. It was like a ghost town. "Where is everyone?" Chantelle asked. He shrugged, not liking this at all. "Hopefully, The wounded have been taken home for repairs. He doubted that, but it was possible that the women were tending to the men. They arrived back at his home, and he opened the door. He paused in the doorway, took one more look around, then seeing nothing, locked the door behind him and Chantelle. "Shower time?" she asked, already peeling out of her dirty clothes. "Absolutely. Then you can tell me what happened." Chantelle smiled as she undressed, throwing all of her clothes straight in the trash can. In the bathroom, they climbed under the hot water and washed the stench of the fight away. After they were clean, they snuggled up on the couch, and Chantelle regaled him of her last few hours, saving the baby and Tanya, and blasting all those voodoo people. Cody still couldn't remember much. Running. Killing someone. It was a blur. He gathered her close, and their lips met. Her perfect scent had returned now that the shower had washed away the stink of battle and his voodoo queen's win. She'd conquered them all. And with nothing more than her own 2 hands. "You're pretty incredible, you know that?" he said as he stood and offered her his hand. When she took it standing, he drew her to the bed. "Me?" She made a snorting sound, but as she averted her eyes and a pink blush stained her cheeks, he could see that his compliment had pleased her. "You know, I think it had a lot to do with our mating," she said. "I have never been so powerful. I think when you died you passed on your strength to me." He loved that idea, but hated it at the same time. "Hopefully you'll be strong, even with me alive. I hope our bonding will help you. And if it did, then I am eternally grateful to my ancestors for that gift." They lay down on the mattress, their bodies fitting together like a lock and key. He groaned as her warm body pressed against his side, her breast squashed on his ribs that still ached. "What's going to happen now, Chantelle?" She ran a hand over his chest, her fingers dancing on his skin and running around his nipple. "I honestly don't know. Do you think your prophecy has come true?" "Well, nothing fell. Except the voodoo practitioners in Marty's house. But they're not dead. So, was the blood connected, or whatever you said needed to happen?" "I'm not sure, but I tried. I used my blood to heal your wounds. And then there's the baby, and Marty mingled his blood with Tanya's. So yeah, I hope it's enough." There was a strange movement at his hip, and Cody looked down. "What was that?" Chantelle rolled onto her side, a rather large bump between her hips that he'd somehow not noticed in the shower. "I think it's the baby." She cupped her hands over her stomach, and a gorgeous little chuckle emerged between her full lips. "Yeah. It is. Show me." He pushed her hands aside and rolled over, placing his palm over her rounded abdomen. There was a push and a roll. "Oh my God. They had a child." "So, our blood has mixed together too?" he asked, unable to look away from the bulge of her stomach. "Yes. There will be 2 babies of wolf shifter and voodoo blood. It will be a new era." "Yes. Come here." He pulled his gorgeous woman on top of him and grabbed her face for a kiss. In a time like this, there was only one thing to do. And that was to make love to his beautiful mate, and thank the universe for whatever forces had brought her to him.
Chapter 19. Chantelle reached into her wardrobe and pulled out the old royal purple dress she'd chosen for the day. She lifted it up and tugged it on over her head and tied a silver belt high on her waist. She was getting bigger by the day. If she was right, then her baby would be here on the next full moon. She had 27 days to prepare. Ha! She laughed out loud. Not only did she never think she would have a baby with a wolf shifter, she'd never thought she would have less than 6 weeks to get used to the idea. Talk about a life full of surprises. The bedroom door banged open and Cody came in, hopefully with news from the pack. "There's 4 men dead and a lot more hurt, but Daniel's with them. And all the children are safe, thanks to you warning us so early last night. Considering the war that went on last night, I think we did okay." Chantelle blew out a long breath. 4 men in a town this small was still a high percentage. If only she had been able to do more for them last night. "All right. Well, please, you stay here and deal with the pack. I have to get home and sort out my life. I refuse to lie here in fear, waiting for them to attack again. She had more to do than just that, but she didn't want to tell Cody that. She was going straight to some voodoo elders and sorting this problem out. After last night, she was no longer afraid of anyone in New Orleans. Her powers were so much stronger than they should be, or were before. Whether it was the baby, the wolf shifter blood, or this was who she was always meant to be, she wasn't sure. But she no longer feared the wrath of the church, or their people. Are Tania's parents and the other people still knocked out in the other house? Cody shook his head. No. Marty said when they woke up this morning, everyone was gone. He should have tied them up or something, but with the baby and Tanya still being so weak, it was the last thing he was thinking of last night. Cody tugged off his old shirt and began to dress in clothes that Chanty distinguished as town clothes. What are you doing? I'm going with you. If you think for 1 minute I'm letting you go alone, you've got rocks in your head. He grinned as he tucked in his shirt and slicked back his long hair. But what about the pack, making sure everyone's okay here? They're fine. Marty's out there with Tanya, her baby strapped to her chest in some sort of wrap thing. Chanty tried not to giggle at the image her mate painted, but failed when she saw the bewildered look on Cody's face. If fate had been correct, and she saw no indications that it had been wrong so far, then Tanya would grow into an incredible leader. Being out there with her baby strapped on while she sorted out her pack was completely fitting. That's great. Well, let's go then. A wolf shifter protector probably wasn't a bad thing, and she knew they'd be stronger together rather than apart. They jumped into Cody's truck and headed off to New Orleans, the silence in the car a comfortable one as they drove the 15 minutes or so to the borders. Where are we going first? He asked. She needed to go to her house to pick up some things, but she could do that anytime. She had everything she needed for her own protection. She had nothing stronger at the shop. So, there was only one other place she had to go. To Tania's parents' house. There's no need to go to the church, or any other group yet, I don't think. Tania's parents are as powerful and influential as they come, so if we can convince them to stop the attacks, then that should be enough. Nobody else will come after us after that. She planned to do a lot more than just convince them to back off, and if the legends were true, then she would succeed. They hit New Orleans and Cody slowed the car, weaving through the small streets and parking around the corner from the huge white mansion. What if they capture us, like they did with Marty? She gave her mate a smile and unlatched her seatbelt. They would not be who they are if they did not have protection spells all over their house. Are you wearing the amulet I made for you? He nodded, briefly touching the center of his chest where her amulet lay. Good. Then you'll be fine. Just make sure, like last time, all your thoughts are on protecting me and nothing about harming them. We'll both be fine. His mouth thinned and his lips drew downwards. She cupped his face in her hands and put as much warmth into her expression as she could. It'll be fine. Okay. Cody hesitated, but then nodded and together, they got out of the car. Chanty touched a hand to her own amulet and focused on her memories of her grandmother, a woman who had passed on too early in Chanty's life, but whose power still flowed through her. They walked across the quiet street and went straight up to the door. She could sense her mate's hesitation, and then she remembered the dolls still in her bag. Don't forget, I wove a spell over Mary and her husband. Their powers have been weakened. They would struggle to do any real harm to us, and I guarantee they will not. She banged on the door. It opened soon after, and she greeted the old butler with a smile. Good morning. Can you tell Mary and James that we are here, please? She stepped into the house without being invited to do so, and the old man scuttled off. She looked around the house, searching for the strong magic she'd sensed last time. It wasn't there. Something was different. Come this way, please, the butler called from the ground floor hallway. She gave Cody a wink and stepped along the marble floors, down the corridor and into a large living room. A fire blazed in the fireplace, and Mary stood by her husband, who sat on one of the expensive couches. Nobody spoke as they walked into the room and stood a few feet from Mary and James. James had an angry grimace on his face, but Mary looked like she was bursting to say something. Chantelle turned to Mary and cocked an eyebrow. "Yes, Mary. Is my daughter still alive?" Chantelle inclined her head and smiled. "She is. As is her son." The relief on Mary's face was priceless and at odds with the snarl of disgust from James. Chantelle turned her attention to Tania's father. "What's wrong, Mr. Thomas? Not happy about your grandson being the new alpha line of the New Orleans pack?" The angry look in his eyes said it all. She was enjoying this tension a little too much. Odd for her. "Please sit, Cody," she said to her mate with a sweet tone. He did as she asked, mirroring the pose of the couple opposite them. "Shall we continue with the niceties, or get down to business?" Chantelle asked. "I will get you thrown out of the church and New Orleans," James yelled at her. "You know that, don't you? You disgusting slut." Cody got up and moved around the table so fast, the crack of his fist hitting James in the face made her gasp. His arm shot out so fast she didn't have time to stop him, nor would she have wanted to if she had. James's head went flying back against the couch. Chantelle grabbed Cody and pulled him back, worried for the powers that may come down and bite him for doing such a thing. James Thomas was as close to a voodoo king as they had in New Orleans. Fear skittled along her veins and she pushed it away. She was so much more than that, and as she stared at Cody, who was still healthy and breathing hard from anger, she knew they were safe. "Don't waste your strength on him, Cody," she said. "It's a waste." Mary inspected her husband's now swollen face. "How dare you? You're lucky Cody is so controlled, James. He could have ripped your head from your shoulders." She smirked at James as she stared him down. He grabbed a handkerchief from his pocket and spat blood into it. "He shouldn't be able to do that here." "Then you need to start examining your voodoo, James." Because he just did. These two had done something truly evil to the pack, and she hoped the voodoo gods would punish them. "Okay, back to why we came. I have a deal for you. Stay away from the bayou. If any of you ever come to hurt one of our people again, I will personally organize a raid on your house. And I guarantee no amount of supposed power you think you have will stop me." Mary sank down onto the couch next to James, fear in her old eyes. "But my daughter. You can come visit her anytime, Mary. I said to harm us. You know the rules. If you come in peace, you'll be fine." She glanced at Cody. "But they're animals." Chantelle rolled her eyes. "They're powerful, majestic shapeshifters who are God's creatures. I suggest you start spreading the new gospel. Both of you. No one is to harm our pack, or they will pay. I will be holding on to my shop and my house, and I want one of you to go over and take the curse off my properties." Mary and James exchanged glances and Mary nodded. "I can do that." "Good. There is also the matter of introducing the wolves back into New Orleans." "Never," James spat. Chantelle waved her hand in the air. "If you don't have the power to overcome decades of bias, then I will go to the church myself." James huffed at the insult but said nothing else. "All right now. I will be contacting some of our people to organize some trading. The housing in our town is horrendous, and we need help building something new." "No way," James ground out between his teeth. Chantelle grinned. "It's either that, or I move everyone back here to New Orleans." She looked down at Cody, who was staying strong and silent. "Maybe that would be better, Cody. What do you think? Buy up some houses in a part of town that's not too busy?" "No." She swallowed the laugh that rose and pinned the Thomases with a hard stare. "I suggest you make a decision, or I'll make it for you. Either you help us build the town up so it's a fit place for your grandson, or I will sell my shop and my grandmother's home and buy up half of Bodie." Bodie was a very cheap part of town that would be easy for her to buy into. Her shop and her home would fetch an incredible price to anyone who knew what they were buying. There were quite a few factions of voodoo in New Orleans, and a lot of money would be paid for the protection her home afforded. Mary whispered fiercely in her husband's ear, and Chantelle sat down on the couch arm, leaning against her mate. Her babe twisted and turned inside her belly, and she smiled, happiness filling her up. She would make a better life for her child. She will be happy and kind. Chantelle had to look away as tears tingled in her eyes. A daughter. She would have to tell Cody when they left. The Thomases stopped whispering and James stood up. Cody jumped up beside her, and Chantelle looped her arm with her mate and stayed seated, unfazed by the venom she could feel rolling off James. He couldn't hurt her. I will speak to some contractors, James said, but they will expect to be paid. Chantelle pushed herself to her feet. I'm sure we can work something out. She had savings and voodoo to barter. Not to mention, she had a town full of hardworking, strong men. Thank you, James. Mary, I shall see you soon. She inclined her head and moved to walk out of the room, Cody at her back. Something made her stop. She turned and saw James chanting, his eyes closed. I don't think so. Chantelle reached into her bag and grabbed one of the voodoo dolls that represented the couple. She didn't wait to check who was who, she just let her power guide her. She grabbed hold of a limb and bent it back, squeezing hard. James dropped to his knees, his eyes flying open and a pained gasp falling from his lips. She let go, sending up an apology to the gods. She hated using her powers for anything evil and hoped they would forgive her. James, I've warned you once, and I won't do it again. If you try anything to hurt us, any of us, you will pay the price. James nodded once, grabbing onto the couch to pull himself up. Let's go, Cody. They walked out of the house, and Chantelle took deep breaths in the clean air. Despite their power being drained by everything that had been done to them yesterday, the home still reeked of evil. Cody grabbed her up in his arms and whooped as he walked across the street. At his cart, he gently deposited her into the passenger seat. You are incredible. What on earth did you do to them? She laughed as her mate jumped in the car and started the engine. Let's go home, she said. I don't feel like staying in New Orleans anymore. She needed some clothes and personal belongings, but she would come back in a few days when her soul was rested. Despite her confidence that everything would be well, that interaction had taken a lot out of her. Cody turned the car around, and they headed back to the bayou. Chantelle, please tell me. What happened? She grinned at him. You heard. I just offered them a solution to the peace we all need. Yeah, but you made them agree to help us. No, I gave them a choice. One that will work for all of us. It would mean jobs for the younger men and better homes. A proper school and a doctor, maybe. She sat back against the seat and let her hands fold over her daughter, growing inside her belly. Safe. Why couldn't they harm us? What if someone else comes after you, Chantelle? I don't want you hurt. She shrugged and smiled. They couldn't do anything to me because I am protected. I always have been. By my blood, my grandmother, my birthmarks. I don't really understand all the reasons, but no one is going to hurt me or our daughter. Our what? She laughed and pulled one of his hands over to her belly, resting it on the bump, grooving and moving with the music on the radio. Our daughter. I just had a vision. And she is going to be beautiful. He chuckled, the sound soothing to Chantelle's soul. Of course she will be. You're her mother. Chantelle looked at the sunshine streaming in the window, calling her home. I love you. Her heart sang as he repeated her words, and she let her eyes close. It was going to be a hard road, but with grit and determination, they would bring peace back to the people of New Orleans. Together. The end.